Man, I feel like Laramie Tunsil is just like changing everything about the NFL almost every year, man. Like first the whole Bong incident in 2016, and then he gets traded in 2019, and now he gets traded again. I mean, he's
Yeah.
just setting up teams for like bright future after bright future, you know what I mean?
I mean, look, the Texans this season, yeah, maybe wasn't as good as last season, but still, man, they were killing it when he was there. Let's be honest now.
I know. I'm kind of shocked about that Laramie Tunsil thing. Like I did not expect him to get traded, but I mean, hey, props to Washington, man. They're making moves.
Exactly. They know what to do. They've been doing their stuff properly.
What's going on, guys? Yash Talalekar and Akila Srivatsa back again with another episode on the Winning Browns podcast, where two Indians try to win more subscribers than the Cleveland Browns have, um, and try to eventually maybe make more money than Myles Garrett made for the Cleveland Browns. And what has been a very
Sheesh.
interesting free agency. A lot of the moves happened before free agency, but still a lot to talk about in
Yep.
today's episode reviewing the chaotic March Madness, so to speak, play on
Uh-huh.
words,
Good
but
one.
the March Madness that is going on with free agency as always. And then we have a fun little bit of episode for you guys, a few fun different rankings, etc. So let's get started. We'll start off with
Actually, Yash, I wanted to ask you on that. How is it like at LSU right now, knowing that the women's basketball team is obviously one of the top ranked teams in the country right now at LSU? Is there a type of like vibe that you feel? Is a lot of buzz? Do you kind of feel like the kind of like sense of like the whole school's gonna come together for a fight to the end type deal?
as far as fight to the end, probably not. But I would say that there's definitely like an excited anxiety about the games because
Okay,
LSU has high expectations in women's basketball as always, right?
sure. I
Um,
mean, especially with with your head coach being one of the greatest head coaches in women's basketball history, right?
Absolutely. And I
So,
would also say from this standpoint, I think because of that expectations, because of the history that we've had, especially over the last 3, 4 years at
hmm
LSU, involving, success that we've had, obviously winning a national championship a couple years ago,
yeah,
there is an expectation to, at the very least, compete again in the Elite Eight, the Final Four, make that again. And
sure.
obviously, the first two games in women's college basketball, they end up being at home. And for those of you who don't watch women's college basketball, um, usually the best teams are expected to end up in the Elite Eight and Final Four a lot more than in men's college basketball. There's not as many Cinderella runs, so to speak. Uh,
hmm
and for that reason, like um, I think part of it is the fact that LSU has a little bit of a tricky schedule, especially once you go to the Sweet 16. But as far as these games, definitely everybody's showing up. Everybody's
Okay,
excited about
that's
it. It's
nice.
really hard to get tickets, man. Um,
Oh, is it?
oh
Okay.
my
I guess
God.
that's good in a way, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I slept the entirety of Saturday, right? Basically. And when I
Okay.
woke up, it was about an hour after the tickets had been released, and I completely forgot about it. And I
Oh
thought that I could
my.
still get it, and I didn't.
Uh,
So I'm trying to get the tickets maybe for Monday night tonight. But again, it's
yeah.
pretty tricky because they're
Tonight
really in
there's a game
demand.
going on right now, um but even then, man, like
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to ask because like I wasn't for anybody who's also watching as maybe a fan of sports in general, like what's the kind of college vibe like when you're at a university that is as competitive in the sports side? So just wanted to ask that question. Now, coming back to our topic today, again, as Yash mentioned, we are going to go into free agency. Kind of look at our. There was a lot to go into free agency, so what we kind of decided was let's just go into things that we feel had the biggest impact. Our overall consensus, kind of, what we thought about the free agency, and was there any big hits? Is it going to be a massive deal breaker or change within any organization based on free agency. So we just kind of wanted to run through that. So looking at free agency, Yash, just kind of run through your top two biggest takeaways from this free agency. What are you looking at from a team perspective? Are your expectations changed? Has free agency been a let's just say maybe not as hyped up or was more hyped up than it should have been? Let me know your thoughts.
Well, let's start off by like reviewing free agency as a whole. I'd start off by saying that, yeah, I mean, I think this year's free agency was a little bit of a disappointment. I wouldn't use the word disappointment because I mean, people
I would.
expected it to be kind of a weak free agency class, especially with all the franchise tags that happened early on. T. Higgins got franchise tagged and then got extended. I think a lot of people were expecting, maybe a tag and trade, if anything.
Sure.
Obviously, there were a few major trade requests. Trey Hendrickson has yet to be traded. They're working on a deal with him. Myles Garrett was supposed to be the big fish of the offseason. He ended up resign or extending a contract with the Browns for 40
Yep.
million a year, if I'm not mistaken, which is just insane to me. Uh,
Worth it. He's worth it.
Absolutely worth it, but it's still insane the amount of money some players are making nowadays. But Myles Garrett definitely deserves it. Um, but I think the big thing that struck me was the fact that a lot of teams were either fully tearing it down or fully like going all in, pushing all their chips into free agency.
Yeah.
I think the two most notable teams that really tore it down, if anything, actually, it's more like one, and it's tragic for me. It's my San Francisco 49ers. Um,
Yes.
we, I mean,
Yeah.
half our
No, no.
roster went,
I'm not gonna lie. I am shocked at the way that it's been handled within the 49ers organization. Because,
to be
I
honest,
mean,
I'm
okay,
not.
no, Yash, let me say this. I expected it to be kind of a big blow up in the sense that, look, half of your players that you knew that were all-star level or
Sure,
Pro Bowl level per se had to go because you just couldn't sign that many players. And you're
absolutely.
talking about the Dre Green laws, just the number of players. It makes sense, but I just didn't expect it to be to this extent. Is what I'm trying to get at.
I agree with that. I think it's still painful to see that we lost a lot of depth. That was for me the more painful thing watching Elijah Mitchell go to the Chiefs. I swear to God, if he ends up becoming the next Jerick McKinnon for the Chiefs, I'm going to put my fist through this wall over here. Probably not this wall because I'll probably get kicked out of Cypress Hall at that point, but that's not a good idea. But yeah, I mean, half our team went to the Chiefs. The other half, like some of our guards went to the Packers, and then I forget the other team. Yeah, half of our defense basically just became the Broncos defense now. So that was
Yeah,
really comically torturing for me. Um, but hey, I think it was necessary at the end of the day because we had a lot of bad contracts on the team. We had made a lot of bad free agency moves over the last couple of years in an effort to go all in, especially last
yeah.
offseason. Guys like Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, etc. And a lot of our core had been aging to a degree. And I had said this in the past. I think I remember saying this, I think in an October or maybe November podcast episode we did that the
This was your
Niners
last
needed
chance.
to tear it down. I don't fully get behind what Ryan Clark said about the idea that we need a rebuild. That's hard to put the word rebuild in your mouth when you have a quarterback who you're about to pay $60 million, presumably. I would probably
Not
go
worth it, but
maybe, but I would go definitely not worth. I don't know if he's worth the 60 million, but he's definitely worth a contract extension nonetheless, and he's going to get it. And it's
yeah,
hard for you to say that when you have a franchise quarterback that you're fully rebuilding. Um, so I would probably go with the word retool more. We still have a core that we're probably going to keep, right? You're talking about the George Kittle, the Fred Warners of the world. We have a few players who we can rely on, Nick Bosa, right? But yes, majority of that depth is
Nick
gone.
Bosa.
Nick
Oh,
Bosa.
my bad. Yes, yes, Nick
Um,
Bosa. Sorry, sorry.
but we're going to have to, we're going to have to we're going to have to get young players. I mean, it's not like we're getting any older. George Kittle is going to be 30, right? We need to find a long-term successor to George Kittle at some point. I thought might have a chance to get Tyler Warren this year. We might, I don't know if we'll draft him. We got a bunch of other problems. Trent Williams is our starting left tackle. He's going to be 37 next year. I honestly don't know if he ends up staying with the Niners after this year. It has been a really tumultuous year for him personally. Um,
Yeah.
he's had some, very tragic circumstances happen within his family, and I would not blame him, and I would very much understand if he retired after this year, and I think it is very much possible.
Hmm.
Obviously, Mooney Ward left for very similar circumstances. Um,
Yeah.
he was going to be 31. At this point, you're relying on Diamador Lenore, who's a good cornerback, very serviceable, but he's limited in what he can do. And on the other side, you got Renardo Green, great quarterback in my opinion, but still pretty young and very inexperienced. So this is a team that I think needs to start looking to kind of maybe follow the Cardinals playbook a little bit and basically start accumulating draft picks and basically find a way to kind of quickly rebuild in 2 years. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles did it a couple years ago, and they did it when trading their quarterback and having
Yep.
a quarterback, and they did it really well. They ended up being in the Super Bowl 2 years prior, or two
But at
years.
the same time, they did fire their head coach. Let's
Absolutely.
not forget that.
And I don't think that's going to happen with Kyle Shanahan. The
I don't know,
chances,
Yash. I don't know, Yash. The reason why I say that is
not
this,
now,
okay?
not now. Maybe in the future, right?
No, but Yash, I'll be honest with you. Look, I've been on kind of you know, a weighing scale, if you will.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm on that side where I'm like, just fire Shanahan. He needs to be gone. And then I'm
Right.
on that side where this guy's a genius.
Hmm.
And I will still be on that. I'm never going to be in the middle. Because
Right.
when it comes to this guy, I just never know. See, look, Josh, I got to be honest with you. Look, if I take a look at Kyle Shanahan's record, right?
Right.
The man is, I can hate him a lot, but I will be respectful where he deserves it.
Hmm.
He's had this job for 8 years. He's 70-62. He's won 8 of 12 playoff games, averaging around 67% of his playoff games, right? He's had one, two, three, I think 4 winning seasons of his 8 years. So essentially, he's
Yes.
50% in winning seasons, right? And in those 50% of winning seasons, 2 times he's taken the team to the Super Bowl, and he's lost both times. Both times to the same quarterback, both times by leading, right?
Sure.
The reason why I state all of this is this: it's time to move on. At some point, 8 years and you haven't won anything meaningful.
I can see an argument,
I'm
and I
sorry.
think it's a fair assessment. I'll keep my evaluation on Shanahan for later on in the episode because we're going to be talking about head coaches. But what I
Okay.
will say with what you said is it is possible. I think this year he kind of
Let
gets
me
a
let me
little bit
just say
of
this one thing, Josh. Let me just say this
sure,
one
sure,
thing.
sure.
I, this is my point. I think Shanahan is a great coach, and he'll get another head coaching job if he gets fired. If he gets
Absolutely.
fired, okay. But for me, it's this: it's this year or next year, and then bust.
Yeah, I
You
mean, I agree
have to
with you.
you have to put the stop.
No, no, I agree with you from that sense because you're talking about kind of going in a different direction, and I think that makes sense. But I think this year he kind of gets a pass because of the injuries, but at some point you got to start wondering why, things are not going to the point where with the amount of talent that they've had, you're not reaching a peak. And granted,
Yeah,
Shanahan's responsible for developing a lot of these players into what they've become and putting together really good coaching staffs. But at some point, if things are not going another way, remember the Chicago Bulls fired Doug Christie in order to make way for Phil Jackson. I'm not saying that's going to happen every time. We obviously know what happened to the Lions when the last great head coach they had before Dan Campbell, Jim Caldwell, got fired. They hired Matt
yeah.
Patricia, and that backfired in the face. But I would say that's why I think it's a good time to start retooling. Because if it comes
Okay,
down to it, push comes to shove, you can go in that full direction, fully commit, rather than kind of put yourself in a position where the coach has a different vision than the GM.
okay.
That's where I stand on
I
that.
can see that.
But
All
I
right.
would like to start. I want to give praise to teams that I think have done really well with this free agency. And I don't want to just talk about my Niners. The two teams that I think nobody's really talking about that have had really, really good free agencies. I'm going to start off with the more underrated of the two, the Philadelphia Eagles. We know what they did before free agency. They re-signed Zach Bond, they extended Saquon Barkley, but I think they've made some of the more underrated free agency moves this offseason. Um, they had a hole in the guard position once Mekhi Becton left, right? They
Yeah.
knew Mekhi Becton was going to leave and they couldn't afford it. So what did they end up doing? They ended up getting a guy who's very similar, who I've been a big fan of. He's been a disappointment based on his uh, draft, where he ended up being drafted at pick 14 of the Houston Texans. But I think he's a great player. I think he was my number one guard in 2022, and that's Kenyon Green. And they traded CJ Gardner Johnson, albeit a very good player, but CJ Gardner Johnson was 28, right? And you're talking about the fact that the Eagles have put themselves in such a good position as far as draft capital, and on top of that, kind of reloading every year in the secondary. Um, and they go and put themselves in a position where they have two emerging superstars in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, so they can afford to let Darius Slay go. They have Avonte Maddox behind him. They go and sign Adoree Jackson, who I've been on the boat of saying is one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the league for years now. Probably what, 5, 6 years at this point.
Hmm.
Um, and he is. And I think he fits that Eagles secondary perfectly. Vic Fangio likes those kind of Giants-esque players. And speaking of Giants-esque players, there's another one he signed, edge rusher off for the Eagles, and yet another Georgia player in Azeez Ojulari, who
Yeah.
he was my biggest draft crush in 2021. I think this guy has loads of potential. He had 8 sacks last year, being the third edge rusher for the Giants. A hell of a lot of pressures. I wanted my Niners to sign him, and I think he's going to be great off the edge for the for the Eagles. But let's just talk about the fact that like this is a team now that has how many Georgia players? I mean, pretty much their entire defensive line is Georgia. Nolan
He
Smith,
is.
Joe Jolari, Jalen Carter, and Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
Nakobe Dean is a Georgia. And if I'm not mistaken, their safety, the guy who replaced CJ Gardner Johnson,
He's
former
also
first round
Georgia.
pick, very underrated. Guy who's been bouncing off practice squads due to injury concerns that he's had, but very good player. Louis Cine, also a Georgia player. I think he is an absolute steal of a get for the Eagles, and keep in touch for breakout player of the year when we do that later on in this off season. He's a guy who definitely should be in the conversation for that as far as the safety position. So for me, I think the Eagles did a great job. And in the other one, I would say this is more obvious, and I don't really need to go and talk about this as much. The Minnesota Vikings. I mean, what they did for their defense. I mean, I'm not saying that JJ McCarthy is Patrick Mahomes. Don't get me wrong, right? But if he has the emergence in his second season like Mahomes did, right? Even
Yeah.
if he's half as good as Mahomes is, the roster that the Vikings have put next to him, oh my God, they are going to be scary as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think I may differ from what I consider like the best free agencies that happened, but without a doubt, the Vikings got to be up there. I mean, what they've done to essentially, they looked at what they had a problem in last year, which was protecting their quarterback, and they said, "I'm gonna get every piece of anybody I can, right, to just make sure I get a big boy roster." I think that's what they were looking for. They just wanted a big man, big boy roster. I mean,
Absolutely.
you look at who they signed. You get Will Fries from the Indianapolis Colts, one of the best guards in the league right now. You get Jonathan Allen, 3 years for 60 million. Then you get Hargrave,
Steal of a
2 years,
contract,
30
too.
million. And you also get Ryan Kelly, one of the smartest players in the NFL right now. And then you also stack up your defense with Isaiah Rodgers, 2 years, 15 million. They've they've just done everything right. And they also sign Aaron Jones again, 2 years, 20 million. Byron Murphy again, a cornerback I don't think is talked about enough. I personally feel. Again, I'm not saying he's spectacular or anything, but I do think he's a valuable asset to whatever defense they're employing out there. Again, 3 years, 66 million. You sign back Harrison Smith again, a 10.25 million contract for a 1 year type deal. It's just perfect way of just really bringing in talent. The other team that I felt was
Before you go on to the next team, I wanted to ask you a question because I know you're more
right.
of the guy who talks about scheme fits, and I thought this would be an interesting point to kind of bring up. Um,
Sure,
with the amount of positions that I think the Vikings were needing going into free agency, being the nickel back position, being assuring the cornerback position and re-signing Byron Murphy, you go and get
sure,
defensive tackles, offensive line. It seems like they're going after specific trends, right? You're talking about defensive lines who are very much down that kind of 49er-esque scheme, kind of what DeMeco Ryans runs, what Robert Saleh runs, that type of
sure.
defensive line. Offensive line is very much Colts-esque. I mean, they got two Colts players, right? Um,
Yeah,
and then on top of that, you're talking about a defense coordinator who loves multiple sets, guy who likes moving around his players in chess pieces. He's done a lot of three defensive end type schemes. A lot of,
hmm,
Josh Metellus, one of the most versatile players in the league, pretty much plays all 11 positions for the Vikings at times.
yeah.
So what do these free agency fit the new and the ones that they re-sign? How do you see them fitting with the Vikings, and what do you see their roles being, just schematically?
Yeah, so from a defensive standpoint, what I'm seeing is that he's um, in the case of the Vikings, when you look at their defense last year, especially, right, you saw definitely a change, right, in terms of how they want to play, the way they want to um, kind of employ their defense, their personality, etc. For example, like Brian Flores, when you think about his days with the Patriots and the New England
Right,
Patriots, it wasn't always a diverse type of line with things you weren't expecting, like five people standing up. Those type of things weren't what Brian Flores had learned from Bill Belichick. It was a traditional style.
right.
I think what he's trying to apply into his defense now is kind of similar to what Vic Fangio is doing. Really, Yash, you're saying it's more of a D'Amico Ryan's Robert Sala. I would differ. I would really say it was a Georgia defense that Kirby Smart has pulled that has changed the football landscape. I think you really bring it back to Kirby Smart, what he's done. The
You're
idea
talking
I
about like
think
different
here,
quarterbacks then basically on the defense, kind of.
sure, maybe from that standpoint, but I'm just taking it from a schematic standpoint. I'm going to get two huge guys in the middle that are going to attract a lot of pressure. And then I'm going to use guys who are big but a lot more flexible and athletic to get after the quarterback. I think that's the way. And then Vic Fangio obviously took it to another level where he
Right.
applied the big man with athletic ability that Georgia obviously offers to Philadelphia. At this point, they pretty much are a team together. But
Like a
what
pipeline, man.
yeah, I know, right? But
Yeah,
what I feel with when it comes to the Vikings is Jonathan Allen, Hargrave. Jonathan Allen's one of those rare players who can play inside and dominate and then play outside and dominate. Hargrave, although like if I'm being honest with you, Yash, I know you're a 49er fan, but he regressed miles
he did.
after Philly to the Niners. I think with the system was the problem. I'll be honest, but I think the other problem was he just wasn't allowed to be himself. Hargrave is a type of guy who wants the double attention. He doesn't want the one on ones. He wants the double attention. He wants to get through the line of scrimmage, not outside the line of scrimmage. I think with Brian Flores here, signing people like Isaiah Rogers, re-signing people like Byron Murphy, fast, quick, but also agile, love to blitz against the quarterback. Some corners don't like that. They just don't like that, right? They want the interceptions, they don't need the sacks. But these
Absolutely.
are the type of guys who are aggressive. And so, if anything I take away from this is just that he wants to apply an aggressive maneuverment. It's not going to be those fancy type of five defensive linemen who are standing up. It's going to be traditional, but it's going to be from places you never saw. For example, Dallas Turner, right? For a guy like that who's by any means not too quick, he's not the fastest guy on the planet. You need a guy like Hargrave who's going to attract attention. They didn't have that last year. You need a guy like Jonathan Allen who can attract attention from both inside and outside. And then apart from that, add in another edge rusher plus another nickel from the other side, right? You don't know what's coming. I think that's what Flores wants to do. And I think also based on the schematics topic, when you look at defense today, that's what you need. You need attraction from the inside, attraction from the outside. When you have both of those, you don't know what's going to come, when's going to come.
Right.
That's the hallmark of any great defense. You look at the 85 Bears, their defensive line could attract so much pressure from inside and outside, that when, Mike Singletary blitzed or the cornerback blitzed, the 46 was scary for that reason. It was scary because either you had to guard the blitzes coming outside from the defensive line, or you had to guard the defensive line. Which were you going to do? If you
Right,
were going to block both, you would have to go double protection. If I go double protection, I have less number of guys to depend on to catch the
right.
ball. Because even though I'm going to blitz, I still have more defensive players than you have players running, right?
From a
Running as in receivers, backs, etc.
Right. And from a standpoint, I guess it makes sense for the Vikings because they're a team that enforces like heavy defensive back schemes too. So in case you want to
Mm-hmm.
blitz, right? You want to get a nickel blitz or something like that, you still have enough men on the far side of the field to be able to
Play
cover
coverage.
receivers in case there's one-on-one.
See, Josh, the other thing that I look at is I think if you're any NFL franchise, the first people you got to look at in terms of how do I want to build a team is my competitors. And you look at your competitors, you can look
Absolutely.
at your division. You look at their division, the Detroit Lions, right? We
Right.
don't know what scheme it's going to be now, if we're being honest with
Right.
ourselves, right? But even then, they have a talented running back. They have two talented running backs, an extremely smart, calculative quarterback in Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have the Sam Laporta. You have an unstoppable offensive line. You look at the Green Bay Packers, a developing quarterback with an extremely strong arm. You have Josh Jacobs, an extremely talented running back. You need to find ways to put the pressure on any offense. And the only way in doing that is reinforcing your defensive line and allowing everybody else to jump in. So I think that's what the Vikings are doing here. Now, the second team that I think I have to talk about are the New England Patriots. Look, let's not just shy away from this, right? The amount of things that they've done this offseason has been record breaking. Milton Williams, 4 years, 104 million. Carlton Davis, 60. Harold Landry, 43 and a half. Robert Spillane, 37. Morgan Moses, 24. Josh Dobbs, Clavon Kaysen, again, one year, 5 million. I mentioned his name because he's extremely underrated. Um, just a lot of other guys. Some people that I didn't even think about, like for example, center Garrett Bradbury, 2 years, 12 million. Certain things I just never thought about. But you look at what the New England Patriots are trying to do, it's a revolution, right? Because they look at it from this sense: we got a top pick in the draft, right? We have talented guys like Christian Gonzalez. Let's. I think Mike Vrabel is just saying, I'm gonna build this team again my way. I know I had something in Tennessee. It worked. I don't blame the guy. If you have something that works, why create something new? Just use it again. I think that's what he's trying to do. Big boy build up on the defensive line. I'm going to enforce pressure on the quarterback. I'm going to let my corners play the way they need to. Let my defensive line play the way they need to. I'm going to have a strong run game with a good calculative quarterback. I think that's what they're going for here when it comes to New England Patriots. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Los Angeles Chargers. Um, Look, it's been tough. I'll be honest, okay? It's been tough because I get it. We re-signed guys like Elijah Molden, Troy Dye, Khalil Mack, no Bradley Bozeman. Bradley Bozeman, I have a problem with. But my thing is this: how do we let Puna Ford and Morgan Fox just walk out on us? Puna Ford was one of the best inside defensive tackles in the entire NFL last year. Morgan Fox, probably the most underrated defensive end in the entire NFL last year. We let him walk to the Atlanta Falcons. We let this guy walk literally 10 miles across the road to go to the Los Angeles Rams, for God's sakes. And then our comeback to that is we're going to sign Najee Harris, Dante Jackson, and Mike Williams. Mike Williams, I'm happy with. Okay, Justin Herbert and Mike Williams were amazing. I was mad when he left, and I'm happy he's back. Okay, Najee Harris, really? I mean, I hate the guy, and he's an absolute waste pick. I mean, the man was a banana buried under 50 pounds of trash, and then you're just trying to bring him up. I mean, literally yellow and gold banana, literally. I mean, he's disgusting. The minions would look at that banana and say, "Why the hell are you here?" It's just
Wow, bro, that is
I
wild.
don't like him at all. I don't like him at all. I'm excited to see if he just turns on into a Barry Sanders all of a sudden. I don't mind seeing it. I don't mind seeing the Alabama Najee Harris. But what I see right now is an Alabama steak eating Najee Harris in the trash can, right across, I don't know, a dumpster. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not happy with that. But then I thought about it, Josh. I thought about it. We didn't expect the bald king of all kings, Joe Ortiz, to make any crazy moves. We expected him to make the moves necessary because he's a Baltimore guy. They're not going to make huge headlines in free agency. Then I thought to myself, okay, you release Joey Bosa, you release Puna Ford, you release Morgan Fox. But what has Jim Harbaugh always said, right? And the many things he said. But one thing he's always said, we're going to restructure from the ground up. We're going to take it step by step. We're going to restructure from the ground up. I'm looking at myself and I'm saying the amount of inside tackles that are in this class are insane. And I mentioned it last episode. There's one guy that people aren't talking about enough who on the inside can dominate better than any other tackle in this class. I said Dion Walker is waiting for LA. That's what the entire thing is about. Screw Puna Ford. He's only going to be with us for 3 years. I get Dion Walker. I got him for 7 years. Khalil Mack is there for me for 1 year. Okay, I'll get another defensive end from this class. Let Khalil Mack be a mentor for this guy. Let him train him. You get other defensive tackles from this class, defensive ends. Now our offense is a completely other story. I don't care about the offense. Whatever. We can manage with our defense. Okay, we manage. The Mighty Miner defense is no joke. Yes, that's the name. The Mighty Miner defense is no joke, right? You look at the way the Chargers played last season, number one in points allowed. They've been substantially the one of the best defensive teams in the league. Now, with all that being said, I'm not happy nor upset. I'm more of like, okay, it's fine. I'm at that kind of point right now. We got Mekhi Becton, one of the best guards in the league. Now I do have my concerns because he came from Jeff Stoutland. Jeff Stoutland is like this. When you play a video game and you have one of those power ups, and you can be the worst Fortnite player on the planet, and you get a power up all of a sudden, and you beat Ninja. That's the kind of guy Jeff Stoutland is. He's that one power up that just allows you to beat anybody anywhere. Mekhi Becton, let's be honest, he came out of what the Jets, right? He was an absolute trash bag. He was an absolute trash bag. And he came in and all of a sudden he looked like a gold plated pizza just on your doorstep. He looked amazing for one season. Now, Jim Harbaugh, he's my guy. He's the greatest coach in the NFL right now. But still, am I don't know if he can do what Jeff Stoutland does on a daily basis. Because that guy, Jeff Stoutland, he's a I don't know prime Gatorade all in one power up for every guy that needs it. He's
He's got
just
the
I
King
mean
Midas touch when it
God
comes to offensive line.
yeah I don't know who K minus is but sure why not.
You don't know this
Did I
guy,
just
King
embarrass
Midas?
did I just embarrass but K you know where I heard of K minus
King Midas.
hate minus
King, King.
King minus.
Yeah.
That's a dumb name. Why would you want to lower yourself when you're a king? You're the highest of the high. Why do you want to minus yourself?
Well, Midas, you know what Midas means, right?
Oh, Midas or not?
Yes,
Oh, I thought you said
Midas.
minus. My
Yeah.
King Midas. Yeah. No, sorry, bro. I ain't got a clue. I remember there was a spin-off about Midas on Super Strikers. I remember that.
So he was, yeah, oh yeah, I remember that. But he was the guy who had like where he touched anything and it turned to gold.
Oh, is this like a philosophy type thing?
No, no, this is like a famous Greek story, I think. I think Greek, if I remember
Oh,
correctly.
is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I have no idea about Greek mythology. I'm sorry. I got no clue. Mr. Big Benick, if you're watching this, don't care really. But if you're watching this,
Yeah.
I didn't listen in class and I still passed. So I mean, okay, King Midas. That's a little different. But yeah, he is the King Midas, I guess. I mean, he touches any guard and they just become Pro Bowl level, anything level. So credit to him.
Absolutely. All right, so we're back to our segment where we're going to be quizzing each other on some interesting NFL facts. And
Hmm.
with the NFL draft coming up, and one of the most prominent names in this
Oh, come
upcoming NFL
on.
draft being that of Travis Hunter, who's a dual threat player, multiple different positions. I got an interesting, and with the hype that is surrounding him, I got an interesting question for you today, Akhilesh. Akhilesh, who is the last player to be listed? Meaning that he not only played multiple positions, but also was actually listed as those two positions to make the Hall of Fame.
Dion.
Nope, that is incorrect. Dion did play both cornerback and wide receiver, but he was never listed as a wide receiver when he played.
Charles Woodson? Probably not, no.
No. You're gonna have to go a little bit, a lot more back for in order to get this one.
A lot more back?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see. I like this though. It's a Hall of Fame, so I like this. Let's see. Receiver and corner.
He
Okay,
wasn't a receiver in corner. That's the hint I'll give you.
Chuck Bernardic.
Close. Same era, but you're just off. The correct answer was George Blanda, quarterback and tight end, also the oldest player to ever play in the NFL. He
Wow.
sorry, not tight end, quarterback and kicker, excuse me. Um,
Okay, that. Oh, come on, Yash. I mean, George Kramer was a kicker and a guard.
true.
But okay, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Look, hey, I'm not gonna doubt people on the kicking game, bro. Kicking is tough. Kicking is actually tough. It's not easy. We saw with Pat McAfee and all those number of people who lost on $100,000. So I'm not gonna say anything. Kicking is tough.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, there you go back and find some of the players who've been listed as multiple positions. Some of the players, some of the combinations of positions are like extremely fascinating. To me, one of the most fun players I've ever got to research on is Browns legend Lou Groza. This guy was
Yeah,
a quarterback. He was also a left tackle and a place kicker. Can you imagine being a left tackle in this day and age and a place kicker? Like Jordan Mailata, for instance, being 6'8", 350 pounds, and then being a
yeah.
place kicker.
That's insane, dude. But you gotta also th think technique back then was so much more different,
Right.
right? See, like right now, we the kickers come from an angle and then push it off inside. From physics standpoint, it's like you're getting more. I guess the potential, the kinetic energy is much more when you're going from a sideways angle. Rather, if you're just one way, it's just a vertical jump like this. Like they will literally kick it like that. Nowadays, they're
True.
kicking it from the side angle up and through. I don't
True. And
know from
kickers
a
are
physics
more
standpoint.
athletes as far as the way they can turn their hips
Exactly.
when it comes to that stuff.
You think about this. They got more abs than a guard does.
More abs than a quarterback does.
Well, that's obvious. Quarterbacks are weak. I mean, they look like flabby
You love
pancakes
hating
that don't have.
quarterbacks, don't you?
Look, dude, they look like flabby pancakes that haven't been on the stove for about 2 seconds.
Hey, hey,
They
don't
look
hate
like
on
microwave
pancakes. Don't hate on
pancakes.
pancakes. I
They
might make a few in a minute.
they look like microwave pancakes. I love pancakes. Give me some pancakes with a little bit of salted butter, a little bit of maple syrup on that. I love it. But you give me some microwave pancakes the size of, I don't know, a hockey puck. Yeah, I'm gonna hate on them. And that's what quarterbacks look like.
Don't
They got
come
nothing on them.
don't come to my room in LSU then. That's the
Oh,
only thing I
really?
might make.
Microwave pancakes? Oh,
Yeah.
come on, man.
Hey, I mean, I can't exactly cook right now with the stove not working over there and whatnot.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well,
is what
LSU.
it is.
Come on, man. All right. Now I got a question for you. Mine's much, much easier. It's not that tough. Um, although the second part of it is tough. Name two coaches, right? One coach for the most playoffs season wins, and one coach for the most postseason losses.
Okay. So for most playoff seasons, I'm guessing it's either got to be one of the guys who has had the most winning seasons. So,
It's
and a guy
it's
who's
most
been there
playoff
for very
wins,
long.
not even seasons, just wins.
Playoff wins, right? Oh, okay.
So one coach for playoff wins, one coach for playoff losses or postseason losses, if you will.
Well, in playoff wins, I'm guessing it has to be Belichick then, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
sounds about right.
Exactly. 31
Um,
postseason wins over his tenure with the Cleveland Browns as well as the New England Patriots. And yeah, 31 playoff wins. The second closest to that is Andy Reid, surprisingly enough. 24 playoff wins.
Sounds about
Uh,
right.
and then the next after that, I believe, would be Mr. Don Shula with 19 playoff wins. So quite an achievement from that end. However, when you think of it, Don Shula had 328 wins as a head coach in
He's
the
been in
regular
playoffs
season,
multiple times.
but 19 playoff wins only, which is kind of
Actually,
surprising.
actually, though, I will make that as my guess for who has the most playoff losses, Don Shula.
Okay, well, that's where you go wrong. I'll give you one more shot at it.
Okay. There are a few other guesses I have. There are a lot of coaches who I know have a lot of wins and have not been as successful in the playoffs. Guys like
Okay,
Bud Grant, Bud Grant wasn't there for too long, so I don't think it's going to be Bud Grant.
okay,
Um, by elimination, I don't think it's for that same reason, Tom Landry. Tom Landry
mm-hmm,
did win two Super Bowls, so I doubt it.
okay,
Um, I want to say Andy Reid because I know that he early on in his career had a lot of playoff losses.
okay,
Um, but he did win a lot more than he lost, so I doubt that he would be on that list. For
okay.
that reason, I'm gonna go with a veteran who never won a Super Bowl. It's tragic that he never won a Super Bowl, and I know you're a huge fan of this man. That's
Okay.
gonna be Marty
Yes.
Schottenheimer.
Yeah. So in this case, you're wrong. And
Really?
you mentioned his name. Tom Landry actually has the most playoff season defeats, highest number with 16 playoff defeats. So
How many does
he had,
Schottenheimer have?
huh?
How many does Schottenheimer have?
Schottenheimer had, I believe, nine, if I'm not wrong. Let me check.
Wow. Wow, I did not expect that actually. That had shocked.
Yeah. So Marty Schottenheimer, let me see. Yeah, 27.8 winning percentage in the playoffs.
Wow, damn.
Not what you want. Yeah. But with all due respect to anybody who's been there, yeah, postseason he's 5-13. So Tom Landry had a worse number of losses when you actually look at it. When you look at Tom Landry's record in the playoffs, um, you'll see. Let me see if I can find it. He's 20-16 in the postseason.
Wow.
But I mean, that just goes to show he's had 20 playoff seasons consecutively.
Right.
That's,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
come on,
understandable. But it makes me
come on,
wonder
right?
though, like it makes me wonder how people might look at him different if it wasn't for those two Super Bowl winning seasons. Would be
Yash, you really think about it. This is the thing, right? When we look in today's media, we'll get to this topic about media and sports and all that stuff later on. But when you look at it, back then, think about this. Tom Landry didn't have a winning season for his first 5 years. Two of those seasons, in 2 seasons, he won a game.
right.
A game. Imagine that. You have Bob Lilly on your defensive anchor. I know I sound like Mad Dog, but like Bob Lilly was a beast. When we really think about it, Bob Lilly was a beast. He wasn't any joke, right? You had Bob Lilly, you had
Absolutely.
stars on that team, and you won one game over 2 seasons. But it's consistency, Josh, that's just elevates the game, regardless of what game it is, right? It's just consistency at the end of the day. But you also got to remember this: he won two Super Bowls, fair, but he lost four, if I'm not
Right.
wrong. He lost, so
No, he lost I think
he
three
lost against the
games.
Baltimore Colts in 7D, I think 1970,
1970. He lost to
right?
Steelers twice, I think
He
too,
lost to the
right?
Steelers twice, that's three. Then he beat the Broncos.
Yeah, I think it's just three.
Maybe he's just three. He's two
Yeah,
and three in the Super Bowl. That's still a losing record at the end of the day, but still prolific career.
absolutely. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is going over the NFL coaches rankings that we have after the 2025 NFL season. I think at this point in the NFL, we're at a point, and Akilesh and I kind of went over this a few months ago when we were just talking off camera about the fact that we've gotten to a point where almost NFL coaches have a little bit been taken for granted for how good they have become as far as tactical wizardry.
Yeah,
That we've kind of forgot that there are really not that many like horrible coaches in the league anymore. And I thought for that reason, it should be an interesting discussion point to wonder, where exactly we would rank all of the NFL coaches in the entire league. So we'll start off um, at the bottom of the list. I started my list already with just kind of some of the coaches that have already um, that just got hired recently. We don't know much about them. There were two coaches that I put in here that have coached games before this point,
Mm-hmm.
and those being Raheem Morris and Brian Callahan.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a sec, but I'll let Akilesh um, catch up to speed over here on his side of the list. And
Yeah. I mean, I think I would agree, coach for coach on that. Maybe the order I would change. Me personally, I would actually put um, Kellen Moore. Actually, no, Kellen Moore, I would be fine with. For me personally, though, I would put Aaron Glenn above Raheem Morris. That's my personal take on it. I don't like the personally. I mean, after seeing what happened last year, we've seen Raheem Morris be a head coach not successfully at Tampa Bay. From a record standpoint, I don't know the man that he is and the leader that he is, but one thing is for sure: the New York Jets have never looked as professional as they've been looking right now. And when I say that, I mean that you don't hear a word from them. That's what I mean professional by the New York Jets. You don't hear this whole hysteria. Even though Aaron Rodgers is about to be traded, no one's getting crazy after it. That just shows that this, inside that office, Aaron Glenn has been showing the world that he is respectfully going to be the best leader, the best coach that the Net Jets can have, probably from, in my opinion, since Bill Parcells. That's my opinion. But I do agree. 26, Ben Johnson, I agree with that. I think Aaron Glenn is just below him, but I would agree with your entire list there.
all right, so you just to confirm, you do have then Aaron Glenn as
27.
27, right? Okay, that's okay. At 25, this is where I'll let you start. I'm interested where you have at 25. The reason why I wanted to mention this is I don't know if like I said earlier, I don't think that usually at the end of a season, there's one coach who you look at and say egregiously, that guy should not be on this list at all. Like I'd put him 32 above or below all of the guys who just recently got hired. Usually that would be like an Adam Gase, an Urban Meyer, Nathaniel Hackett, something like that. I don't know if
Sure.
Brian Callahan and Raheem Morris to me are really bad coaches. But I don't know if that they're that bad where you should put them at 32. And I definitely think that the guys ahead of them are definitely a tier up, even from how qualified Ben Johnson is as a coach.
Hmm.
And we've never seen a coach come in with that much hype, at least in our lifetime,
Sure.
to Ben Johnson. So I'm interested in who you have at 25 for that
Yeah,
reason.
for me, 25 is actually going to be Dave Canales of the Carolina Panthers.
Okay.
Um, I think actually no, no, sorry, my bad. Spoke too soon. I don't think that's. I'm sorry. It's gonna be for me, Brian Dable. Sorry, I was looking at my list
Brian
wrong.
Dable. Oh, wow. Interesting.
Brian Dable, I'm gonna keep 25. For me, this is the thing. You look at his first season, and I praised him historically. He was just way beyond his years. He was able to take a team that people looked at as a no loss cause and elevate them to such a supreme level. What has he done since then? He's taken a Saquon Barkley, paid Daniel Jones a bunch of money, and then went 4-13 or something ridiculous like that. Next season, this past season, even worse. Now, I'm not saying Brian Dable is the worst coach in the league. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you can't tell me he's a top 10, top 20 coach when you take a team that made it to the playoffs and got better roster wise, and then you make them go 4-13, and then even worse the next season. I just don't see how that's happened. You don't improve the roster. Your coaches aren't also being beneficial towards the roster, right? I just don't see how Brian Dable now is all of a sudden a top 20 coach. That's my opinion.
Personally, I don't have I have Brian Dable a little bit higher than this. I get some of your points definitely, but I think you're blaming a little bit too much that on Brian Dable. I think that the stuff involving Saquon Barkley, I think that blame should be given more to Joe Shane, the GM. If we were making a general manager list, certainly Joe Shane would be near the bottom of this list, and I
It's
think he
true.
definitely deserves that simply because of the Saquon Barkley
Yeah.
decision, let alone some of the other moves he's made. I think Brian Dable is still a very good coach, and I'll get to him in a little bit, and I'll explain my ranking. But at 25, I got Mike McDonald. To me, some of the moves that he's made in his first
Wow.
year. I'll say this. If we were making this list closer to the middle of the year, I would probably have him higher. And I know that the Seahawks team went at 8-9, but some of the decisions he's made on his coaching staff to me have just been head scratchers. I get the idea of firing Ryan Grubb. It seemed like they were never on the same page. But then why did you even hire him in the first place? Some of the positional coaches, he seems to be just all the time kind of fighting over control. There are a lot of reports that come out within the Seahawks organization as far as different visions within the organization. And as a leader, I feel like you're the type of guy who needs to be able to set all that control. And I'm really starting to question, is Mike McDonald kind of building off of what the GM, I'm forgetting his name right now, John Schneider and former ex
Mm,
head coach Pete Carroll kind of built as the foundation with Seattle and the receivers that they had and the talent that they already had. It's going to be interesting to see what the Seahawks team does down the line, but for now, I do have him at 25. Um, this one is definitely subject to change, though. I want to make that very clear. I did like Mike McDonald when he first got hired, but I have not been a big fan of some of the moves that he has recently done on his coaching
mm.
staff and kind of the vision that he's put out there. So yes, I do have him at 25. If you don't mind, I will go at 24. You mentioned this name earlier.
Actually, Yash, if you don't mind, could you go from 24 to 20 and then I'll do from 24 to 20. We'll go every five.
Absolutely. I'll start off at 24 to 20. At 24, I'm going to go with Dave Canales. I think it's fair to say that Dave Canales is somewhat of um, still to be determined as a coach. I think we realize that he's very good at being able to develop and handle quarterback situations, not just with what he's done with Bryce Young over this year, but what he's done in the past with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. But that being said, I'm personally of the belief that if with a bad team, your ceiling is 4-13, 5-12. That's somewhat indicative of your limitations as a head coach. And that we'll get to that with the next coach that is going to be at number 23. But I do think that he has done a great job with kind of boosting the morale of a Carolina Panthers team that's been so dysfunctional and has such a lack of direction over the last few years. I think he's a great leader, but I do question some of his schematics at times. I
Okay.
do think that his management of his defensive staff could be better at times. I don't think that he's given Ezra Rivero a full ability to work with that defensive unit that he's had. Ezra Rivera is a very talented defensive coordinator, but um, his defense was straight up awful this past year, and I think Canales definitely could have helped him in some instances last year as far as managing or micromanaging certain things. Granted, I'm being a little overcritical, but given the fact that this is a 5-12 team, I think it's kind of fair to say that Canales at the end of the day is still to be determined. And as this roster continues to get better, I think his ranking will definitely improve on this list. But right now, I do have him at 24. At number 23, this might be a little of a hot take, but I have Zach Taylor. Akilesh, you know me, I've never been really a fan of Zach Taylor. I think that
No, no, no.
first off, I don't think that he is that good of a play caller. Um, I think he is ridden off the fact that he has an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow and that he has an elite wide receiver tandem in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Um, I do think that I might have been a little bit harsh on him in the fact that I thought Brian Callahan was carrying him in past years, but I also think that this year, with some of the other stuff that has gone on, with the fact that I think he was way too late in firing Lou Arnumo. There have been signs last year that he should have probably fired him after the fact that this is the second straight year where they've had a bottom five defense. Um, I think on top of that, you talk about the fact that he just seems to have a real lack of respect within his locker room. You talk about how many times he's been called out by his players in press conferences. There is a lack of maturity that is shown several times as far as poor discipline with this team. I understand that he's a young coach and he's trying to be a little bit fair to his players, but at some point it becomes reckless to the point where you have these times where players end up costing the team the game. One of the biggest instances of this was when Jamar Chase kind of lashed out at a referee. against the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think that he is really entirely responsible for kind of the malpractices of his own coaching staff. And for that reason, I think he's really been carried by a roster that's better than his entire coaching ability. We saw how bad he was when he had a terrible roster. This first 2 years of his coaching tenure, they went 4-11-1 in year two, and they were the worst team in the league in year one. Um, and I don't think they had that bad of a roster in comparison to what other number one overall pick teams have had. You know, Marvin Lewis with that same roster at worst went 6-10. Zach Taylor could not even muster 2 wins, barely. And those 2 wins weren't exactly great wins if you look at it. So to me, I just look at Zach Taylor and say, yeah, he is definitely overrated. If this were a year where there were a lot more incompetent head coaches, he would definitely be higher. But for now, I do have Zach Taylor at 23. Um, at 22, I'm gonna go with Shane Steichen. I know you will be a little bit upset with this. I think Shane Steichen's a good
No,
coach. Don't
not
get
at
me
all.
wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I think some of the leadership questions that have come out about him over the last year definitely have him a little bit lower on this list, especially his handling of the quarterback situation as far as Anthony Richardson's development. I know a lot of players within that organization, within that team, have complained about his micromanaging and as far as his ability to be able to, kind of give coaches full, full what's the word I'm kind of looking for? Full laissez-faire on being able to manage their own respective field and their own respective positions. I don't think he's exactly good at managing rotations, especially when you look at the wide receiver room. And for that reason, I just think that he's very limited as a head coach. And for that reason, I have him at 22. At 21, this is where I'm going to go with Brian Dable. Um, Brian Dable, I have a little bit of a soft spot here because of what he did with his first season. It's one of the most impressive coaching jobs I've seen, and I think he gets a little bit of too much slack for the fact that he's had one of the worst rosters in the league. Um, I think this year will tell how good of a leader he is. I think the Giants have much better roster this year. But I think for now, 21, with what he has done in the past and what he's done more recently, this is a fair spot for him. And then at 20, I'll be very quick about this. I think this guy is the quintessential 20. There's nothing bad to say about him, but there's nothing that should put him above the guys who are ahead of him. That's going to be Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins. There have been times where people have questioned what he can do when Tua's not on the field. The offense is just never good when Tua's not on the field. Granted, their quarterbacks are behind Tua are not always the best, but it just makes me wonder if he didn't have Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle being the offensive quote unquote genius that he is, how good would that offense be? Um, I would wish that he hires better defensive coordinators. He did hire Vic Fangio, but Vic Fangio didn't exactly have full ability with the Dolphins to be able to stretch his field like he did with the Eagles. Neither did he with the this more recent defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. And for that reason, I think Mike McDaniel in this day and age, like I said, same thing with Shane Steichen, same thing with Brian Dable, same thing with Zach Taylor. In other years where they're more incompetent head coaches, they'd be higher. But for now, they're just kind of stuck in the middle, and that's 20 to 23 for me.
Oh, you're done?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's just get started off. I'm okay. This idiot. Okay. Well, look, 24, Dave Canales, 22, Shane Steichen. Completely agree. Shane Steichen, I was a huge fan of him. I explained the vision that I had with drafting, Anthony Richardson, as your quarterback, but it hasn't worked out clearly. I don't know as a leader if it's the problem. His schemes have always been great, but this is a make or break it season for Shane Steichen. I think Brian Dable is a better coach, and therefore it's more of a break or break it season for him. But yeah, definitely Shane Steichen is there at 22. Deservingly is there. For me, I'm gonna disagree with Mike McDonald being at 25. Instead, at 23, I'm actually going to keep Mike McDaniel. Look, let's be honest. You have Tua, who is I don't know really. He's kind of like a flip of a coin. You never know when Tua's going to be an outstanding quarterback or below average quarterback. You have Tyreek Hill, who clearly doesn't want to play with you anymore. You have Jalen Waddle, who was much better before you got there. You have Jonnu Smith now. You have all these guys, and yet you barely have got winning seasons or barely have got losing seasons. It's just inconsistency at the end of the day. Like, what do you want to do? And everybody knows this. You can score 72 points in one game in the regular season, and everybody's going to be like, doesn't matter because you're going to lose in the playoffs. You can't play in the cold. It's always the same thing. And because of that, I just don't believe in Mike McDaniel right now. He's a genius when it comes to his play calling, the schemes, everything. Genius. But look at the winning record. You have insane talent offensively. And the offense, with all due respect, is anemic.
Right.
The
That
defense, I get it. You need to find a good defensive coordinator. You don't have much talent on the defense, with all due respect, but you're trying to make the most use of it, and I give you that, okay? I give that. But at the same time, you can't be telling me that you're an offensive genius and you have an anemic looking offense that cannot execute when it matters most.
I agree
So
with that 100%,
I
actually.
can't give it to Mike McDaniel. Now, 21 is where I would put personally Mike McDonald. Look, this guy, I mean, for me, first season with a team that has known its head coach for 13 plus seasons, you're put in a tough situation. You need to make hires quick. Look, this guy's 36 years old, okay? Inexperience is there. Yes. Did he make some coaching moves that were looked unnecessary? Sure. But at the same time, when you look at what he was able to do, develop Geno Smith, to have an offense that was looking pretty good, to have a very, very, very ferocious defense, a defense that came after the ball quick, a very aggressive defense. Obviously, that didn't work out for them in all situations, but that's something a head coach can learn from. And to take a team to 8-9 your first season as a head coach, I don't think is bad at all. I think it's just improving the team slowly to get to a better level. Now, 20. So 20 was a tough spot for me, I'm not going to lie. I'll finish up to 15 if you don't mind, Yash.
Sure,
But
no problem.
20 was a tough spot for me, but I'm actually going to go with Kevin Stefanski here.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because there's one other name, which is Jonathan Gannon. He's going to be 19 for me. But the reason why I put Kevin Stefanski that low is because you've been there 5 years. How many winning seasons have you had? How many playoff seasons have you had? How many playoff wins have you had?
Hmm.
That's where I come to. And I get it. You've really struggled to have a good quarterback. You just look, Yash probably knows this more than anybody else. I've been one of the biggest supporters of Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah.
He's an offensive genius. He really is. Using the run game and the pass game to the perfect ratio. I really do. But at the same time, you have to execute at some point in time,
I
right?
agree.
You just have to at some point. And look, he's doing good. He really is. And I'll say this, probably by the mid of the season, Kevin Stefanski can be 12 for me. That's what I'm saying. He can jump that high. But it just depends on what he's going to do this season. It's a make or break it season for me, for Kevin Stefanski. That's why he's that low. Jonathan Gannon, look, last year for me, Jonathan Gannon was 31. He showed me
Wow, really?
nothing. He showed me nothing that I could go after. Kyler Murray was much, much like more compressed into a certain style of play. He couldn't play free. The offensive line was abysmal. The defense, I don't know what defense was there. Was the defense the offense for the other team? I don't know what it was. So for me, I despise Jonathan Gannon in his first season in Arizona. But this season he's jumped up so much. I mean, what he did to get this team to 8-9. You look at this roster even now. I wouldn't say it's a top 15 roster because it looks that depleted from a talent standpoint. But even then, even still, I believe what Jonathan Gannon can do with this team is take a team that may not be talented, but super hardworking and dedicated and fitting his style. So he's gonna, overall elevate the situation of the team even more. I love what he's been able to do. I don't think he's a top 15 coach yet, but definitely if he can do what he did last season and improve it, he's a top 15 coach regardless. Now, 18. 18 for me is going to be Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh,
T-
okay.
Look, 24 and 40 over 4 years. He failed with the New York Jets. He's been, really just scraping by with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would say personally that he's had a good load of offensive help. Their defense, it's good, but I just think Todd Bowles is the type of guy who's more of a defensive coordinator than he is a head coach. That's just me personally. I just don't see him being the best of best leaders. I just don't. But he's been able to get playoff seasons out. But it's like the Mike McDaniel thing where it's just like barely playoff seasons. So that's where I'm going to put him. 17. Now, people might get mad at me for saying this, but I don't care. Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel is 17 right. You look at what he did at Tennessee to take a team that never knew what winning meant, right? For in nearly 20 years and bring them to a position where they were able to make the AFC Championship. He won Coach of the Year. He was able to take a depleted team all the way to the top. He, from a defensive standpoint, was a genius in his time at Tennessee. Obviously, the last couple of seasons didn't work out, but you remember this, Yash. Every single Tennessee Titan player, not one, even those who got traded by him, said Mike Vrabel was the best coach I've ever had.
Right.
That's the
Absolutely.
truth. That's the truth. So when it comes to Mike Vrabel, he's 17 for me. Yes, he didn't have the best of seasons the past couple of years, but this man's a damn good leader, and he's proven it over and over and over again. So he can do it. You beat Bill Belichick in your first ever playoff game. That sets a standard. So I think Mike Vrabel definitely is for me 17. 16 is where I put Zach Taylor. I look, Yash. I'm gonna speak it for him because he's been doing way too much. This man is a hater of Zach Taylor. Day one, I swear, the moment he saw his face on a Bengals with the Bengals hat on, he just wrote hate all over it. This man has been hating Zach Taylor since the day he was born. Okay.
I don't think I can do that, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. You look older than him. With all due respect,
That is true.
both of us look older than him. Both of us look older than him. I
It's a
look older
shame you
than
guys
you.
can't see my face right now on camera, but
Look,
yeah.
I look older than you, and you look older than him. That just goes to show we're not doing that well. Okay. Um, when
Gen
it comes
Z,
to
Gen Z has too much stress.
yeah, maybe we're Gen X. I don't know I don't know. Zach Taylor, look, I get it. He's been riding off that one Super Bowl season. I get that, but at the same time, offensively, this team has always been at the top. They've always been at the top. They've always been consistent offensively, meaning that they're always at the top, right? Defensively, this past season, yes, it was a complete fall off. And yes, September, November, August and September, November, middle, they're always at the bottom. I get that. I get that. But at the same time, you can't be telling me a guy that always has winning seasons or close to winning seasons isn't a top 16 coach. And he's been doing it consistently. He's elevated Joe Burrow from a good quarterback to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's taken the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins combo to the next level. He also uses tight ends really well. It's an underrated factor, but Mike Gesicki, all these guys he used really well over his tenure at Cincinnati. I just think from an offensive standpoint, he's at such a point where he's executing better than everybody else and he's doing better than everybody else. I can't put him down. 15. Now, 15 is where I'm going to put D'Amico Ryans. He fell off a
Whoa.
large he fell off a large bit for me, Yash. I know it's not popular, but I gotta say he fell off a large bit. You took a team defensively that was there, improved it slightly. I'll give you that. CJ Stroud fell off so much, so much. Leadership within the locker room was not there. Hope wasn't there. Hope wasn't there. I just don't see D'Amico Ryans right now as a top 10 head coach. He was last season. He's fell off a lot this season.
That one really caught me off guard.
Yeah. All right.
So I'll start off by saying this. I get what you're saying with Zach Taylor. I get what you're saying with D'Amico Ryans. Um, I do not agree with you on those two specifically.
Fine
Um,
with that.
rest of the list I think was pretty good. Let's go back to, yeah, I mean, this part of the list I'll get to in a sec. Um,
Okay.
I like it a lot, but with Zach Taylor and D'Amico Ryan specifically, I disagree with you. And I'll start off with Zach Taylor because D'Amico Ryan's is going to be a little bit higher on my list. I'll tell you how much higher later on. Um,
Okay.
but as far as Zach Taylor goes, um, yeah, I mean, this is a guy who has had in now we're talking 6 seasons as the Bengals head coach, right? We criticize
Hmm.
other offensive genius play callers, so to speak, for I know you've criticized Kyle Shanahan, and I will get to him later on in this video. Um,
Okay.
but Zach Taylor has had a top 10 offense merely twice in his tenure as an offensive play caller and as a head coach, dating
Okay.
back to
That's the point you didn't
2019.
make.
He's never had a
Okay.
top five offense, which is alarming for a guy who has one of the top five quarterbacks in the league, um,
Okay. So,
one of
so if
the
that's
best
the argument.
receivers in the
Okay.
league, and
I'll,
one of
I'll
the
let you
best
finish, but
number
if that's
two
the argument.
receivers.
Okay.
Not to mention, I would also argue if you look at you talked about his overall scheming and that type of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I disagree with you on that vehemently. For starters,
I don't know.
this is
So.
a team whose run game went from one of the best in the league with Joe Mixon to when losing Joe Mixon couldn't
Hmm.
even muster a middle of the pack run game. They were bottom of the
Who is
league.
a running back?
Yes, I get it. It was Chase Brown and then Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert, for that matter, did better though with the Bears than he did with the Bengals. So that should be put out there. Um, much better.
Okay. Fine.
Um, but when it comes to Zach Taylor, as far as being someone who can create from the run game, I don't
Hmm.
see that. When a guy relies heavily on his star players to that degree, I feel like this is a guy who really is relying on 4 or 5 players on that whole roster, mostly the guys on offense, but even defensively. You talk about a team that really has only had success with him when when those players are the ones that step up and when there's depth around those players to build. We criticize the Bengals front office a lot and I mean a lot, and I think they deserve it. They're cheap. They do management in a really, really awful way, and I think that's a discussion for a different day. But for the what it's
Right,
worth, they
Yash.
have built a good roster over the last few years, and they have kept their core in together for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, Yash.
Spite of
Hold up.
that, they've
Hold
gone
up.
8-9, 8-9 these last 2 seasons. To me, that just shows the flaws of their head coach in Zach Taylor.
No, hold up, Yash. Okay, this is where. Okay, a couple of points that you mentioned. You said
Sure.
the offense is anemic. You said he's relying on 4 or 5 guys. You also mentioned that like, I guess they're not. They haven't been a top two offense only twice or 3 times. How many years has Joe Burrow been the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well,
Five.
if we're excluding, would you, let me ask you this, would you exclude his
Mhm.
rookie season? Because he did play 12 games in his rookie
I
season.
would include his rookie season, and I believe it is his fourth year because both of those were
Last year, right? The year when he got
right.
injured.
Exactly.
I'd
Yeah.
exclude that. I would
Right.
not
So
exclude his
really, Joe
rookie.
Burrow's been there for 3 years, right?
I would not exclude his rookie season because he was still on pace to get 4,000 passing yards that year.
Okay, okay. Regardless, though, he did get injured, right?
He
Because
did get
we
injured,
equate.
but he played
No,
an exorbitant amount of the season at that
no, no,
point.
no, no, no. I'm not undermining Joe Burrow here. That's not
Sure,
my
sure,
point. My point, rather, is to say that when we talk about a top five offense, let's look at history, right? Whenever you
sure,
talk about a top five offense, what do you look at? You looked at a quarterback had a very good season,
sure.
right? Regardless of who it is, he could be a Joe Flacco at 45 years old or a Tom Brady at 22. Your top five offense means you have a very good quarterback that had a very good season. That's the undermining deal, right? So when we look at Joe Burrow, really he had 3 seasons where he could have contributed to a top five overall offense. In
Sure.
those 3 seasons, they were a top two offense
They weren't a top two offense, actually.
or a top five offense,
No, not top
whatever the case
five.
may be.
They were
Whatever
ninth
the case
and
may be.
seventh in the league offensively, and their best season was this past year, where
No, no, no.
Joe
But you
Burrow and
mentioned
Jamar
that.
Chase had
No,
career
no,
years.
no. But you mentioned they had a top five offense under Zach Taylor twice.
No, no, I said they never had a top five offense. They had a top 10 offense twice.
Okay, right. Top 10, top five. Okay, fine. Top 10
And for a
offense. Even
team
in
that
that
has
case,
that much offensive talent, I feel like they should be able to do that,
but that's the
especially
difference. See, Yash, that's the difference, though. when you say talent, all that stuff, yeah, that's true.
Sure,
But okay, for every great coach that's ever been there, from Sean Payton to Tom Landry to all these coaches, they've always had a stellar quarterback. If you
sure,
compare Bill Belichick's record, although he's, in my eyes, the second greatest head coach in the history of football,
sure,
right? Even then, I'm still putting this. Bill Belichick is an average head coach without Tom Brady. That's the truth,
sure,
right? Vince Lombardi is average without Bart Starr.
sure,
Tom Landry's average, and etc. So if we're
sure,
gonna measure Zach Taylor, right, without Joe Burrow, right, that and also with Joe Burrow, and say he had all this offensive talent, let's also look at it from this standpoint.
sure,
We talk about Jamar Chase and all these people. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins all together have only been comprised of 2 seasons, right? When we're talking about majority of amount of time, has really only been 2 seasons where both of them have consistently been, or all three of them have consistently been together under Zach Taylor's tenure. Is that a fair assessment to say? I think it is. I think it is, right? You take that into account. The second thing is, why are all of a sudden we're putting a offensive-minded head coach defensive responsibilities? When have we ever done that? Have we ever heralded Joe Gibbs as a great head coach because his defense always made the plays where it mattered most? Have we always heralded Bill Belichick as an offensive mastermind? Or do we give that credit to Josh McDaniels whenever he's the offensive coordinator? I don't think we've ever done the opposite. So let's stop this whole thing about Zach Taylor hasn't done anything to improve the defense. That's not how we've ever looked at a head coach. That's how we should probably never look at a head coach. I don't think that's right in any sense. Um, hopefully, I guess my audio, right? Why are all of a sudden are we putting now this defensive responsibility to an offensive minded head coach? We never said Kyle Shanahan was a responsibility for the defense falling off in the Super Bowl. We've never done this. So why start now? That's what I don't get when it comes to Zach Taylor thing. Now, I will agree with this sentiment. Now you got to also understand, I'm not putting Zach Taylor as a top 15 head coach, right? I'm putting him off that. All I'm saying though is this: when he can consistently pull back a team that's been drowning, when he can consistently pull back a team or push up a team, if you will, I don't know, that's consistently drowning every single season, there's some amount of a head coaching quality that definitely matters. Now, I will say this though, in defense to Yash, I will say this. I don't know, and I'll also say this. As I mentioned before, the list is very fluid, meaning it could change, right? But the
absolutely.
reason why I'm saying Zach Taylor at 16 right now is he could well off go to 24 in my books after the season. He might not even have a head coaching job after the season. Because if you guys have been watching the NBA, it really doesn't matter how long you've been there, what success you've had. You could win a championship one year, make the playoffs consistently, and take a team that was probably not even remembered in NBA history like the Denver Nuggets and bring them up to something that actually matters. And then just get your behind thrown out,
Yeah.
right? So, that could happen to a guy like Zach Taylor. So who knows? But my essential point is this: Zach Taylor has consistently taken teams that, in all honesty, right, when we look at this last season or any season that they've fallen off, Zach Taylor shouldn't really get the blame. This past season, their defense made every single mistake. I will say this as a Chargers fan. They scored nearly 40, I think it was 35 or 40 points on us. And they were down 28-7 or some abysmal number like that.
See, but
Now, Jim Harbaugh is Jim Harbaugh, so he made the comeback happen. But you got to put it on the defense. This past season was all defense.
See, but that's
Only
where I think
one
you're
season.
missing. I think you're missing even more minute details with
No.
this guy. The difference between Zach Taylor and some of the coaches that you put underneath him, the guys like Kevin
Mhm,
Stefanski, guys like Jonathan Gannon, guys like even
mhm,
Todd Bowles and Mike Vrabel, who I think
right.
you're undermining in a little way, is the fact that these are guys that are much better decision makers on a play-to-play basis. They're much better when it comes to scheming. They might not
Yash,
have as
Yash.
many responsibilities as Zach Taylor, but when it comes to those responsibilities, they are the ones who are executing every time. Zach
No, they're
Taylor
not. No,
is
they're
the
not.
one
No, they're not.
who in 2000, I mean, this is one of the things I think most people don't talk about. This is a Bengals team who we've been complaining about for now a half decade as far as their woes when it comes to their offensive line. You mentioned this earlier when it came to their offensive line, their struggles. I would make an argument their offensive line struggles are because of Zach Taylor.
Oh,
I cannot tell you how many times I've watched a Bengals game where I've seen Joe Burrow play off of play action, run basically right into a sack because of a poor scheme issue off of an offensive line being coached to shift in a place where he should not have in the first place.
Yash, can I be completely honest with you? Can I
Sure.
be completely honest with you? We, I think, I don't mean this personally on you or to anybody else, but we got to stop acting like we're head coaches. What do we know about their scheme? What do we know that's what the offensive line was meant to shift, or
Well,
that's
we
how
know
the
what Joe
offensive line
Burrow
was
has
meant
been
to shift?
calling out himself in press conferences several times. We know what Jamar Chase has been calling out
Yeah,
several
what
times
was
in
it?
press conferences.
What was it?
Those are things that are egregious
No,
for
no, no,
any head
no.
coach.
No, no, what was it? What did they call out? They called out their
Jamar Chase
offensive line.
called out several times how they're not throwing him the ball on play action passes where he's the
What is
first
that
and
supposed to mean
second
about
read.
what does that have to do with the offensive line? You know the number of times. See, this is my problem. Joe Burrow, he gets a lot of
Oh, if
hate
you
from
want to
Shannon
talk about
Sharp.
offensive line, I could talk about how many times Joe Burrow's talked about how he's been told to extend the play into the right side of the field, right?
Hmm.
And you got a defensive end who is unmarked every single time on a sack. He's talked about that in several podcasts.
You realize the number of the defensive end he goes against, the T.J. Watts, the Baltimore Raven defensive ends that they pull up against him. Right. Look, now I
Sure.
will say this: their
So
offensive
why is
line
TJ
from
Watt being unblocked then?
hold up. It's not okay. This is the difference. T.J. Watt doesn't get unblocked. T.J. Watt gets blocked, but it doesn't matter. There's a
Against the
difference.
Bengals?
Every time. Every time. You got to
That's
see Yash. At one point, it becomes talent. Their right tackle is abysmal. That's where this whole abysmal thing comes into play. And the other thing I'll mention is this, Yash. The other thing I'll mention is this. We put enough blame on head coaches. We put enough blame on quarterbacks, safeties, defensive coordinators. When are we going to put the blame on position coaches? Are we not going to talk
I
about the
can
offensive
agree
line
with you,
coach?
but who hires them? Who hires the position coaches?
Fair. That's true. That's a fair point. But at the same time, you got to look at the standpoint of I'll pull up this guy, the greatest offensive line coach that I think has ever existed, the current Eagles offensive line coach with
Howard Mudd, right?
uh no, I'm saying Jeff Stoutland. Jeff
Oh,
Stoutland to me is the greatest, right? Jeff
sure.
Stoutland, you look at his days in college, right? He was there, I think, at Miami for a good amount of years. Their offensive line ranked bottom 50
Sure.
for 4 consecutive seasons,
Sure.
right? He got the blame, he fixed it, and he came back. Now, in this case, obviously, it hasn't worked, right?
Sure.
It hasn't worked. That's all fair. But at the same time, you can't tell me he's going to be the reason for everything. If the offensive line doesn't work, that's because of a schematic issue he didn't do. The defense doesn't work, that's because he doesn't care enough about the defense. The Joe Burrow is not properly making the reads, that's on the head coach as well.
Well, I think it's
See,
fair to do that when you look at the coaches that you put underneath him, especially guys like Vrabel, Bowles, Gannon, and Stefanski, who have been quick to fire people who have been problems within their
that's fair. That's
organization,
fair.
and
I'll
then
give
on
you
top
that.
of that, improve on their coaching in the future, especially
I'll give you
Stefanski
that.
and Bowles.
I'll give you that. But at the same time, we got to remember, right? You look at the Bengals this season; they fired over half of their coaching staff.
That's
We
fair.
got to give credit to that,
That's
right?
fair. Yeah,
And you also got to recognize this: their defense, although abysmal this season, past couple of seasons have been a top 15 defense at least. Overall, have been a top 15 defense over the past couple of seasons. The year they made it to the
no, no,
Super
no, no.
Bowl,
Last two
yeah.
years they've been bottom five.
No, no, I would say the year that they made it. I'm not talking about statistically here, but the year they made it to the Super Bowl, the
Oh, you're
year
talking about
when
the
they made it
okay,
to the
yeah, okay,
AFC
I see what you're saying.
Championship,
I think you and
those
I
two
got the years
years,
confused. Yeah.
those 2 years, I would say they had a
Yeah, I
top
agree with
15
that. Yeah,
defense
yeah,
at least,
absolutely.
right? But and then obviously over the past couple of seasons, it's fallen off. And I would say if I
Mhm.
was the head coach, I would have given it 2 years to see if we could bounce back. In this case, we didn't, so he's fired, right? I would say for me, Yash, when you look at the Bengals, the offensive line is the biggest problem, and what needs to improve is the right side of the offensive line. Because Joe Burrow, naturally is going to go towards the right on a play action play. He's not going to go towards the left on a play action play. You're a right-handed quarterback, just from a logical standpoint. If I fake it here and then move my entire body like this, I got to throw something like that. If I move to the right, I naturally throw with that arm, right? You get what I'm saying? So it just makes a lot more sense from that standpoint. But okay, I'll end
I'm
my
glad.
whole
I'm glad you
soliloquy.
brought up the right side of the offensive line, though. You know how much the Bengals spent the year after they made the Super Bowl on just the right side of the offensive line, and you know how effective that was in the next few years. And I want to make it clear.
No,
The
I don't
guys
want
that
fucking
they
Bengals.
the guys that they signed were by no means scrubs. The guys that they signed were Alex Kappa, who was an above average top 20 offensive lineman in his final 2 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and was a Super Bowl winner for the
Okay,
Buccaneers in 2020. Ted
okay.
Karras, who in his final year with the Patriots was so good that he had actually a higher PFF grade than David Andrews, who is
PFF
one of the
means
best
nothing to
centers
me.
in the league.
Sorry, I'm sorry. PFF means nothing to me when it
All
comes
I'm
to the offensive
saying,
line. I'm sorry.
well, yes, I agree with you that PFF usually doesn't mean anything, but what I do think is indicative of how well a player fits in the scheme. Okay.
I don't know about that.
Cincinnati and as far as offensive line play, Cincinnati and New England run a very similar scheme, or at least used to those 2 years. Ted Karras fit that really well. Ted Karras went from an above average offensive line in 2 years to one of the worst 10 offensive line this past year, as far as the center goes, at least. And
Look,
then you got Lyle Collins, who in 1 year went from easily widely regarded as one of the maybe the top 15 tackles in the entire league on a Dallas
that's
Cowboys
fair. Good
offensive
point.
line that was very strong to not being on the Bengals anymore.
That's a good
That
point.
speaks
I'll give
more
you
to
that.
me on the offensive coaching staff. And that's why I still think that at the very least, fine. I maybe you don't have Zach Taylor as low as I do, but I
Yeah,
still think that he should not be above Mike Vrabel, not be above Todd Bowles, not be above Jonathan Gannon, not be above Kevin Stefanski. I think he should still be in the 20s at the very least. That's
I
where I
look.
vehemently disagree with you.
Look, I'll say this. Maybe I am wrong in putting him over Mike Vrabel, Todd Bowles. Definitely putting him over Jonathan Gannon. Jonathan Gannon has improved to me that he's a guy who can win all the time. He hasn't done that for me. But again, he's only been there 2 seasons. I'll give him that. But at the same time, I'm not putting him over. I'm not putting Jonathan Gannon over him. However, I'm also not gonna put Shane Steichen, Brian Dable, and Mike McDaniel over. I'm not gonna do that. Which sounds more ludicrous to you? That's up to you guys. But
Comment section,
we're,
let
we'll
us know what you think on that part. But
we'll stop
um,
there. Yash, you continue with your
now, Akilesh,
feel
if you
free to
don't
say.
mind me going, I'm gonna go up to 8 from here because I think that I'm gonna kind of divide some of these coaches in tiers. Some
Okay.
of them are really, really close, and I'd understand if you think that I'm a little too low or a little too high, and especially the highest of the bunch.
Go ahead.
But we'll get to that in a sec. But I'll start off with 19 through 16. They're very
Okay.
similar to you. At number 19, I'm gonna go with uh, Kevin Stefanski. I agree with your evaluation of Kevin Stefanski. I think that he has really high highs with the Browns and he has really low lows. Obviously, he's a two-time Coach of the Year winner. He's a guy who revived Baker Mayfield's career before the Browns eventually screwed him out of Cleveland. For what it's worth, I think he did better with Deshaun Watson than most coaches would have, given how bad Watson was with the Browns. And then kind of helping Joe Flacco have a renaissance. Jameis Winston played as good as I thought he would with Stefanski, and I think that's partially because of how good Stefanski is as a play caller. He's great at scheming offensive line, running backs. For what it's, I mean, he made Jerry Jeudy finally live up to the hype that he had coming out of college. And he's hired some good defensive coordinators, especially the likes of Jim Schwartz. But obviously, this past year was probably the worst year of his coaching tenure with the Browns, being 3-14. Even though they were fighting in a lot of games, that just does not speak highly on what he does with a bad roster, in my opinion. It showed his limitations. I'm concerned how the Browns do with a worse roster this next year. Obviously, they're entering another rebuilding phase. And from
Yeah.
that standpoint, I don't think Stefanski is as good of a head coach as I originally thought he was. But I still think he's definitely better than a lot of other head coaches in the league.
Hmm.
At 18, this guy is most subject to change, in my opinion. I'm going to go Jonathan Gannon. I think he's perfect as far as right above Kevin Stefanski. Um, I'm a little higher on Jonathan Gannon than Akhilesh is. Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've said this before. I think he's very similar to Dan Campbell in a lot of ways. I think the first year that I saw the Arizona Cardinals play with Gannon, they were fighting in every game, much like the Lions were in 2021. This past year, he did so much with so less. Uh, you know, help Kyler Murray get back to looking like a franchise quarterback. Um, that defense, you're talking about so many young players, the likes of Darius Robinson, Max Melton, who else? BJ Ojolari, Dadrian Taylor Demerson.
Yeah.
All of these guys, relative no names to the average NFL watcher who were key contributors to the Cardinals, especially at the end of the year. And I think a lot of that has to go on Jonathan Gannon. And I think if they spend a lot more money, this Cardinals team, unfortunately, they didn't spend much money like that I would be impressed by otherwise in this free agency. But if they did, I would be looking at them as a Super Bowl contender this upcoming season. And we'll see what they do in the draft. Maybe they can change that. I doubt it, but I still think really highly of this Cardinals team, and I'm really excited to see what they do this upcoming year. Um, at number at number 17, I'm gonna go with Dan Quinn. This is going to be, I know Akilish might disagree with me a little bit here. I don't get me wrong, I like Dan Quinn. I want to see more out of him. That's where I stand on it. I get that he had led the Washington Commanders to the NFC Championship this past year. Um, I also think that
Wow. Wow.
Akilish has some thoughts. I'll let you
Yeah.
go. I'll let you go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Dude, how? Wait. You gotta stop. Wait, so you got D'Amico Ryans, you got Mike Vrabel, who
Yeah,
last time I checked hasn't done anything in the NFL for a couple of years. You
sure,
got Todd Bowles, who I've never seen win 11 games in my life.
sure,
Huh?
sure. Right.
What do you want to see out of him?
Well, let's start off with this. Dan Quinn has never had above a top 18 defense. This actually was the highest ranked defense that he's had in his tenure as a head coach. We've talked about in the past that
Okay.
there are coordinators who are better as coordinators as head coach. Now, I'm not going to say that, okay? I'm not going to say that because Dan Quinn has shown that he is a very qualified and very competent head coach. But we've also talked about
Right.
that this is an extremely, extremely deep year as far as how good head coaches are. And I think when it comes to teams that do less with more, Dan Quinn, while he's able to do less with more, and this is why I have him at 17 and not 25 per se, okay? He's
Mhm.
also a guy who, when you take out certain players that are that good on his team, a la a Jaden Daniels, a la a Matt Ryan, a la a Julio Jones, he has shown that his ceiling is very, very low. Now,
Mhm.
there are things that could possibly change now that he's in his second time with the Washington Commanders. Obviously, I'm going to give him credit for the fact that this was Jaden Daniels' first year. As a rookie, they went really, really far. But in the
Mm.
same way that D'Amico Ryans saw, or with the Texans, we saw, CJ Stroud have a sophomore slump, right?
Mhm.
I'll get to this more with D'Amico Ryans, although I was impressed with how D'Amico Ryans was still able to get that Texans team with as many disasters as they had to the playoffs when I thought that, quite frankly, they should have not been anywhere there. I want to see what Dan Quinn does the second. Now, if Dan Quinn does the same thing or even, has a D'Amico Ryans-esque season next year where, they struggle, but they still make the playoffs, they still win a playoff game, he's going to be probably closer to 10, 11 on my rankings, maybe higher, depending on the circumstances. But for now, given the fact that he has his limitations as a play caller, as a defensive play caller, given the fact we've seen a ceiling before as an Atlanta Falcon, I want to see how much he has changed as a Washington Commanders head coach. And for that reason, I'm keeping it at 17 just to be safe.
Okay, I'll interject here for a couple of minutes. I won't take too much of your time. Now you have given me the reason. I get where you have thought to put Dan Quinn. I don't agree with it because I personally feel like a head coach, if we're seeing, is as limited as we have described Dan Quinn as. You don't take a rookie quarterback who is considered to be not even a, by some people, not even a top five quarterback in the past year's draft to a level where, yes, I know, I'm sorry, I had to,
Yeah, I
but
know, I know.
right to a level where he possibly was in the running for MVP, right? So, I mean, Clint Kubiak should get the most amount of credit for that from a coaching standpoint, but Dan Quinn also gets some of it, right? Now, I do agree with you. The defense hasn't looked good, but this is where I will disagree with it. We're comparing his Atlanta days to now, right? This is what I'm going to say. When you look at the Atlanta days, you never had an organization that always had his back.
That's
We
fair.
we
Yeah, I agree
we
with
saw
that.
that throughout. You look at Washington now. You look at their general manager, the owner. It's a whole with Magic Johnson. It's a whole new regime that they've built in. You got to also think about this. The Washington Commanders had a previous name. I'm not going to
Mhm.
mention it. Previous name, and then they moved into the Washington football team, which was, I mean, probably the saddest thing that's ever happened in the NFL. You don't have any creativity. You just want to call it a team. Why not just Washington football team? And then from there you go. I mean, even Paul Brown was more creative. He put his own damn name called the Browns, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Then you went to the Washington Commanders. No one likes the Commanders. What does that even mean? You don't even have a symbol for a commander. What is it? A sparrow, a crow? What do you want a commander to be, right? You want an army general? An army general just looks pathetic for a
Apparently,
football
Commander's a
team.
person who puts a lot of tariffs. But we'll keep that out of.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you're gonna get us canceled now. But essentially, the idea behind it is like you have all those things in place, right? Before, and then you come to a point where you don't know what a winning season means. Ron Rivera got them to some sort of high, but then after that it was just real low. So you don't know what winning means. And Dan Quinn got hired. Everybody thought it was a mistake. I'll put
Mhm.
myself in it. I was like, why
I'll
are
put
you
myself
hiring
too.
him?
Yeah.
Like you could have hired so many other people, but why him? I mean, the miracles that happened, like this was a Cinderella season for this team. I just felt so motivated watching this team. I'm not a fan
Absolutely.
of this team, but I just felt motivated. I think that's what Dan Quinn does.
Mm.
But look, in my books, I'll tell it to you right now. For me, he's 13, 14 for me. That's how high he is on my list. But I get it from the standpoint of you just know what you've seen before and you're just not ready to give it to him right now.
Yeah.
I get it. But at the same time, for what he's done for such a sorrowful, situation, I just think you gotta
I
give him.
think I'm looking at it from a sense. I can tell where you're looking at it. You have more sympathy towards a coach, being the fact that you look at football from a coaching mindset a lot. So you
I do.
give more
Yeah, that's a
praise when you
problem.
see more creativity. For me, I'm looking at it from more of a general manager
Players.
perspective. I'm looking at
Sure.
it from, if I hire this coach, which coach am I likely to not regret as much, even if they have these problems, even if they don't have these problems. So I think that's kind of where we're different as far as our list. That's what I can tell so far based on what we've hired and how we've critiqued each other's lists. Um, but going on to number 16, the next coach that I have is going to be Mike Vrabel at 16. I think this is for some reason yeah, there we go. Um, yeah, I mean, for when it comes to Mike Vrabel, I think he's shown his limits also in the past, right? We're talking about, I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, 5-11 the last season he was with the Titans, or 5-12. This is a Tennessee Titans team who has at least remained very consistent with Vrabel, in spite of not having, maybe not the least talented team in the NFL, but certainly not the most talented team. He has done well with, he is a guy who, he's one of those guys who has both expertise on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. He helped contribute to Ryan Tannehill's career revival. Um, he's a guy who still managed to get 8, 9 wins out of a team that really didn't have a true quarterback situation for a long time. He's a man who led a defense that was constantly changing defensive coordinators, but still managed to have a top 10 defense every year. Um, they managed to have the best record in an AFC that was basically killing itself over and over again in 2021 because of how competitive it was, right? And they managed to be the best team, although granted, that didn't last long in the playoffs. I think Mike Vrabel has shown why he's a good coach. I think he's also shown his limitations as far as his ability to hire competent coordinators at times. I think he's a little bit stubborn, a little bit sometimes too old school for this day and age. I think his stubbornness catches up to him at times. And for that reason, I think that he's shown his limitations when he has a lesser roster. And because of the fact that he's not one of those coaches who can per se elevate talent that much more than some of the guys I have ahead of him, that's why I have him only 16. Um, I think it's too early to say what I think about him as far as a Patriots head coach. This is not a ranking as far as a forecast goes. If it was, I'd probably have Mike Vrabel a lot lower. But knowing what he's done as a head coach in the past, I have to put him at 16. So that's where I have him there. At 15, I'm going to go with Pete Carroll. Very similar reasons, to be honest with you. Pete Carroll, as a defensive coordinator, has gotten worse and worse as the years have gone on. For what it's worth, though, this is a man who still, at the end of the day, still manages to get at the very least 7, 8 wins out of his team. This is a coach who, in spite of sometimes having really bad rosters or rosters that nobody really expects anything out of, gets them to the playoffs. We saw that 2 years ago with the Geno Smith-led Seattle Seahawks team.
Yep.
This is a team that I think he's very good as far as being able to develop players and hire good coaches as far as positional coaches. You were talking about that earlier. But I don't think he's good as far as overall unit coaches. He's, for some reason, has an infatuation with Tom Cables, who I've been on record saying is one of the worst offensive coordinator coach or offensive line coaches in the league. And that breaks my heart to say because I kind of also have a soft spot for him. He also has a very shady track record in the last few years as far as offensive play callers go. And for that reason, I just cannot put him any higher than 15 when you look at the guys who are ahead of him.
Yep.
At 14, I'm going to go with Kyle Shanahan. This one's going to be surprising, I know, for Akhilesh from the standpoint that I'm a Niners fan. I've been critiquing Kyle Shanahan for a long time. I don't think I've been as critical as him since 2020. But the reason why I have him this low is because of who I have ahead of him. I don't think he has a good track record of hiring offensive play callers behind him, which sometimes I think he needs. I think his own stubbornness as an offensive play caller bites him in the ass a lot more than he thinks. I think in the last couple of years, especially his track record as far as hiring defensive coordinators has surpassed him, if I'm using that expression right, in the sense that he went from hiring Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans to hiring Steve Wilks and Nick Sorensen, which both did not work out whatsoever. I think on top of that, you're looking at someone who has diminished in his ability to develop and maintain an offensive core and an offensive identity, and someone who I think gets too much credit for his offensive line schemes. As good as they are, overall individually, their offensive line has struggled. We're talking about the lack of development in Colton McKivitz, Spencer Burford, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel. These are guys who, the 49ers were extremely high on, who keep getting worse as the years go on instead of better. And I think those things have ended up biting the 49ers in the ass as the years have gone on. On top of that, I think that he is very stubborn as far as knowing when to let go when it comes to positional coaches. And I think that has also hurt the Niners in certain ways. And I don't think that he has the greatest track record as far as consistency when it comes to decision making, when it comes to, fourth down play calling. And at the end of the day, as good as a coach as I think he is, those are the types of things that, when you don't have the consistency to be able to continuously say, hey, I'm taking a 7th round quarterback and making him look like a franchise quarterback, at the end of the day, now we look at Brock Purdy as more of a franchise quarterback than in years past, right? Whether, Akilesh is not nearly as high on Brock Purdy as I am, right?
No.
But we'll definitely argue that Brock Purdy is better than any Niners
Hold up.
quarterback.
Josh, can I tell the story?
Absolutely.
Okay. I still remember the day, guys, right? So this happened in um so when we were in junior year, Yash and me had the same chemistry class. And so what happened was that was a time when it went from you guys remember, right?
Yeah.
You had all those quarterbacks and then Brock Purdy came out. And I remember him. I remember him playing against the Miami Dolphins. I still remember the game. He came out and he didn't have a crazy game, but he had a good game. And I remember coming to Yash and I said, "Man, y'all got the quarterback. I'm telling you, you finally got your quarterback." Yash looked at me like I was crazy. Yash looked like
Yes,
I
I
drank,
did.
I don't know, some albendazole or something. I just went crazy or something.
Oh, how the
He
tables have turned.
he looked at me so crazy, and I just told him, "Look, he is that Joe Montana that you guys haven't found. He's gonna be that Tom Brady that you guys haven't found." He has proven it again and again and again. Now, he hasn't lived up to a top five quarterback ever in his career to this point. Yash will disagree with me on that flagrantly, but this is my point of view. I just wanted to put this out there. I was the one who convinced Yash that this is going to be your
Hey,
quarterback.
I'll
But
give it to you. You did. And
yeah,
I'll say this though. I think more and more I'm starting to see, I think John Lynch should deserve more credit for how good of a talent evaluator he is compared to Kyle
yeah,
Shanahan. And I think we're seeing that more and more often. For that reason, I just cannot have Kyle Shanahan any higher right now than 14. Um,
okay.
So after Kyle Shanahan, yeah, number 13, and this might be a little bit higher. Honestly, when I was ranking the head coaches, I don't think I expected to have this guy that high. Um, but yes, he's impressed me a lot, especially this last year and kind of risen up the ranks, in my opinion. I'm gonna go with Todd Bowles at number 13. Um, I think that Todd Bowles got an unfair hand in New York, as do a lot of head coaches in New York because they just don't get a lot of resources to work with. I think Bulls did learn at Bulls, as we've seen through more than 1 year, unlike Quinn, did definitely learn from his mistakes with the Jets, specifically his ability to hire offensive coordinators. Obviously, he was given Byron Leftwich to work with in his first year as Buccaneers head coach. Um, and that didn't work out so well, even though they had Brady. So after Tom Brady left, he fired Byron Leftwich, got Dave Canales, lost Dave Canales after a year to becoming the Panthers head coach, and then went and got Liam Cohen. And I think now his track record of hiring offensive coordinators multiple times has been just flat out solid. You look at how he's contributed to helping Baker Mayfield revive his career. And on the defensive side of the ball, I feel like the Buccaneers have gotten worse than they were under the Brady years. They've gotten a little bit younger, and they're still putting up better numbers than they were during those few years as far as just overall defensive development and just overall defensive, just playing together as a whole unit on all three levels of the ball. Todd Bowles has some of the best schemes you can find for a defense coordinator in that standpoint. Um, there is a limitation to the fact that he does get the advantage of playing in a fairly weak division in the NFC South. But I will make the argument that given the fact that this talent has gotten worse over the years, he has still managed to keep this team as competitive as anything and has gotten them to the point where they've nearly made an NFC championship a couple times. And I think that should be given a lot more credit than I think a lot of people give for how less of talent that this team has compared to some of the coaches ahead of him. And for that reason, he has gone up to number 13 for me for that same reason. Um, and then at 12 to 8, and this is subject to change. This is subject to, I think, be debated. Um, Honestly, I can see an argument for any of these guys being number 8 and any of these guys being number 12 and any of these guys being in between. Personally, this is just the ranking I have. At number 12, I'm going to go with Matt LaFleur. Um, Matt
Wow.
LaFleur is really impressed me as a coach recently, especially with how he coached with Malik Willis as a quarterback this past year. I think he's done a good job developing Jordan Love. I think he's done a good job as far as scheming for guys like Josh Jacobs, as far as the limited amount of receivers that the Packers have. But he also does have one of the best rosters in the league. So it's harder for me to put him higher than some of the guys who I've seen them multiple times over with worse rosters still put up similar results. Additionally, I don't think he's had as good of a playoff resume as some of the other guys who are ahead of him. Um, and on top of that, the one season where we've seen his team per se deal with a lot more injuries, that being the 2022 season, they were a little bit worse. Am I being a little bit overcritical on Matt LaFleur? Yes, absolutely I am. But once you see the guys who are ahead of him, you'll understand why, even if you don't per se agree with me. At number 11, I'm going to go with John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh, for very similar reasons, is at number 11. He tends to struggle a lot when he has a worse roster. And we've seen this multiple times, particularly towards the middle of his tenure with the Ravens throughout 2013, 2015, pretty much the end of the Joe Flacco years. But we've also seen what he was able to do the final games of his 2021 season when Lamar Jackson got hurt and that whole roster was hurt. They were in every game against some of the best teams in the league, including the Green Bay Packers. Um, I think his development and his ability to keep the Ravens as a long-term contender for so long deserves credit. The reason why I struggle with putting Harbaugh any higher is because number one, he doesn't coach any side of the ball per se. He doesn't call plays on any side of the ball. That's number one. And number two, and for me personally, I prefer guys who can coach on one side of the ball. I think it provides a little more effectiveness. And number two, I think at times he gets carried by Lamar Jackson quite a bit. I think Lamar Jackson does lead him a lot of times to better game management than he actually has. His decision making at times is extremely questionable, especially in the playoffs. I think that you talk about a guy who, we talk about those 5 games at the end of the 2021 season where, yes, they were in every game. The fact that they lost a lot of those games also speaks on the fact that, I think better coaches would be able to find ways to win those games. And at this point where we are in the rankings, I think those are the types of things that make the difference between coaches of his stature and higher. So John Harbaugh, for that reason, is at number 10. At number 8, I'm going to go with Sean McDermott. For very similar reasons, I think Sean McDermott at times can be carried by Josh Allen, but is a very good coach in his own right. We've seen what he did in 2017 with the Bills team that really lacked in talent. We've seen what this Bills team has been able to do when Josh Allen rarely is injured. And obviously, it should be noted that he has been able to help in Josh Allen's development. He has been able to help this team manage to constantly go 13-3 every year. He has managed to help lost talent both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But like I said, he's also one of those coaches who's not particularly good at being able to call plays on either side of the ball. And for me, that diminishes his standing a little bit because of that. So for that reason, I have him at number 10. At number 9, I'm going to go with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, to me, has shown that with rosters that weren't nearly as successful as previous rosters, he can do a lot more with a lot less. I think what really impressed me this past year, however, was the fact that he was able to take a lot of free agents who were lesser commodities, guys like Christian Fulton, guys like Poona Ford, guys like Elijah Molden, and make them into not just good players, some of the best players at their position this year, right? Now, granted, he doesn't call plays, and like I said, I prefer that in my head coach. For that reason, he is not a little bit higher than he should be, and I do think that he has been the benefactor of having some really good rosters in the NFL in both his time with the Niners and the Chargers. I think he also did have a really good quarterback in Justin Herbert that a lot of other coaches would kind of desire for. I want to see him this time around, have a little more success in the postseason before I can put him any higher. If we're talking about just overall success as a head coach, Jim Harbaugh would probably be top five in my eyes, right? What he did with the Niners was historic. Um, but for now, I think nine is a fair ranking for him, given what he's done in the past and given what he did this past year. And then number eight, I'm gonna go with DeMeco Ryans. Like I said,
Oh
guys who
God.
I prioritize guys who call plays on one side of the ball. DeMeco Ryans has had a top three defense this past year. He's had a top five defense each of his 2 seasons as the Texans defensive play caller. Additionally, this Texans team went in the first year from one of the worst teams in the league to a playoff contender both times. In yes, maybe a worse off AFC South, but the turnaround, I think you talk about a team that has so many young players, guys like Derek Stingley, guys like CJ Stroud, Will Anderson, Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petrie, Kalen Bullock, etc. And to make them that good that quickly, I think definitely earns a lot of flowers. Additionally, I think that his ability to know when something's not working, something like Bobby Sloak, a guy who we were praising last year, and knowing that that doesn't work, fire him on the spot and be able to change ship right away. I think that takes a lot of guts as a head coach. Additionally, I like his game management style. I think he's very good at being able to make quick decisions as far as icing the kicker, special teams decisions, knowing when to go for it, etc. I think he's the best in the league as far as that. He's very aggressive when he needs to be. He's very stingy when he needs to be. And for that matter, I think he deserves a lot of flowers. And for that reason, I have DeMeco Ryans at number eight. Yes, against some guys who have a lot more experience than him. But I think that's how impressed I have been as far as his first 2 years. And then on top of that, you add in the fact that, yes, he did beat Jim Harbaugh in a playoff game. And the defensive performance specifically against Justin Herbert is why I have him this high. I think his playoff resume is better than a lot of these guys already, especially McDermott and Jim Harbaugh and Matt LaFleur. And for that reason, I have him number eight. But like I said, Akhilesh, I understand that this can change based on what you prioritize as far as a head coach. So again, 12 through 8, I can very well understand any argument you make that puts one guy ahead of another. This is just where I prioritize who I would hire as a coach. And I would prioritize hiring DeMeco Ryans over any of these guys because I would trust him more as a defensive play caller who has done these types of things and has these types of tendencies.
Oh God. Um, okay. I'm not gonna try to get too mad here, but I don't see how you take a guy who, I mean, I'm just confused with your reasoning. You say
Okay.
you like coaches who prioritize one side of the ball and
Mhm.
give another side of the ball to the other side,
Sure.
right? That's what you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim Harbaugh, Sean McDermott, John Harbaugh, all three guys have been more successful compared to DeMeco Ryans, compared to Matt LaFleur, compared to Todd Bowles, compared to Kyle Shanahan.
Yes.
Does that, I mean, you prefer something, but from a result standpoint, they overbear all of those guys combined, right?
Yes, but you are also taking in consideration what they had, right? John Harbaugh's
Yeah.
been more successful when he's had better rosters. When he's had worse rosters, I don't think so. Sean McDermott, same thing. Jim
Tell
Harbaugh
me one. No,
is the
hold
only
up.
one you can make that argument with.
We got to stop this. We got to stop this, Josh. When has a coach ever been not? When has a coach ever been successful with a poor roster?
DeMeco Ryans.
No, no,
In
I
his
will
first season,
never. No.
absolutely. Tell me,
Sure,
you were
sure.
the one who
No,
was
no,
screaming at
no.
me for
I
having the
agree with that.
Texans
I
as a
agree
winning
with that. I
seed.
agree with that. What was his record in his first season?
If I'm not mistaken, 10-7.
What was his record his second season?
His record
With a
ten
more
seven.
improved roster, if we're being quite honest, from a general manager standpoint, a much
I don't
more
know if it
improved.
was more improved given the fact
I
that
would
they
say
were
so.
struggling on several sides of the ball and they were still able to get the same result.
That's not a matter of an improved roster or a not improved roster. That's a matter of whether the roster can play or can't play. And that depends on the
Sure.
coaching standpoint as well. So I think that diminishes your point. But look, I'll be honest. I mean, a couple of names have completely thrown me off. I mean, Matt LaFleur at 12 was shocking to me. John
Mhm.
Harbaugh at 11 was shocking to me. But I'll go through my list and then we'll maybe clear some stuff up as we go. For me, number 14 is who you kept at, I believe 17, if I'm not wrong. That shocked me. But I think I'm going to go Dan Quinn at number 14. Look, you
That's
take a
fair.
team that's never known success and you bring them and you elevate them to a level of, I mean, magic, right? You talk about a magical season. This was one of those magical seasons for the Washington football team. I get it from Yasha's standpoint that you just haven't seen Dan Quinn elevate his team to an extreme high level, although he did get his team to go to the Super Bowl in the second season in Atlanta, although that gets left out quite a lot.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But this is a guy, another guy who specializes in one side of the department, if you will, on the defensive side of the ball. Hasn't worked out well for him as a head coach, surprisingly enough. But we'll see how that goes this season. Obviously, Cliff Kingsbury and the whole offensive side of the football has worked very well. Obviously, their general manager has been doing a fantastic job. Lermy Tunsil got signed by the Washington football team, I believe, this season. So they've just been able to bring in talent overall. And I think with the way Jaden Daniels has been playing last season, pretty much an MVP, at one point the MVP frontrunner, he's really been able to elevate himself. Hopefully he doesn't go through the sophomore slump that CJ Stroud did. Hopefully just gets better, but we'll see how it goes. 13, I'm going to agree with Yash here. I think Kyle Shanahan, he put 14, but I'm going to go 13 for Kyle Shanahan. Actually, scratch that, Yash. My bad. 13, Pete Carroll. 12, Kyle Shanahan. Um, I look. I think I like Pete Carroll a lot from a standpoint of. I don't necessarily believe he's the type of guy to coach one side of the football. I just don't see that in him. I
I
think
agree with
he's
that.
more of a overall head coach, but he's been successful at doing it. And to Yash's point, honestly, look, I get it. You're an offensive genius or you're a defensive genius, and that's helped you out more. That's fair. But for me personally, I feel those coaches that are overall head coaches, especially in today's game, are much more successful than those who are position based or, specific side based type coaches. In previous times, yes, people like Bill Parcells, people like Bill Walsh's, those 80s, 90s, yeah, they were successful during that period of time. But I think right now you need an overall head coach to steer and to be one of the best. I think that's what we're seeing from today's game. It's an
Mhm.
evolution. Well, are people going to be ready to accept that? I don't know. But that's my viewpoint. Now, Pete Carroll, obviously, he had a really successful career at Seattle. He again, we have to remember from a college standpoint at USC, he led probably one of the most dominant USC football teams that we might have ever seen. And then you come in to Vegas. You have Tom Brady as an owner who um, doesn't get mentioned quite enough because he probably has a lot of hand in what they do and how they want to position themselves. You're gonna get a real steel mill type vibe, I think, from Pete Carroll, but you're also gonna get like a really jolly vibe, if you get what I mean. A guy who just really wants his team to love football. I think that's what's gonna happen. Um, we'll see how it goes. Obviously, the roster needs a lot of improvement, but I think Pete Carroll can definitely steer them in the right direction. But I don't think he tops any of these guys coming up. 12, Kyle Shanahan. Look, I've been on a rant about how I just believe Kyle Shanahan is an overrated head coach. I think I saw a list recently for 2025. They had him at number three. So I just believe Kyle Shanahan's always overrated. I don't like the way. He's been utilizing his talent. It's been abysmal to me. But I think the thing with Shanahan is from an offensive standpoint, he's just such a genius. You can't put him down. But at the same time, he hasn't executed what needs to be executed, which is a championship. And I just cannot put him above any of these coaches that I have right now. Number 11, I'm going to go actually, in this case, I'm going to go Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur, I've been extremely high on. From the day he was a head coach, many people have put him down. And Yash, I'm going to mention you because you did.
Yeah, I did. Yes. He
Um,
has grown on me though. I will admit that. Yes.
I mean, you mentioned that he's not that well with a depleted roster. You look at the Green Bay Packers right now. You don't have an insanely great roster. You have a lot of young talent, but you don't have an insanely great roster by any measures. You have a lot of young talent,
I
but not insanely
disagree.
great
See, I
roster.
disagree on that notion. I've
I
heard
think
that
so.
notion a lot, but you're talking about so many different guys who've been, maybe no, there aren't like per se any superstar names on this team. I get
Sure.
that, but
Mm.
you look at the Packers draft hit rate in the first and second rounds at guys who, are supposed to live up to a specific expectation. Not only do they live up to that expectation, they're exceeding that. So the guys that they draft are doing exactly what they expect. The free agents that they bring doing exactly what they expect.
That's a mark of a good head coach, is not?
I think that's also I think that's even more the case, the mark of a better GM to be able to identify talent and get
I
that
mean,
talent on the team.
look, that's a fair point, but my thing is this. We talked about the Bengals and you mentioned this. When the
Mhm.
general manager brought this right tackle, that right tackle, this an offensive lineman, that offensive lineman, but they slumped. Is
Sure,
what you said.
sure.
I don't necessarily look at it that way because if we're gonna go based off PFF grade, my God, a lot of things can go askew
Well,
from
I could
that
have
standpoint.
gone a lot further in depth, but we have time constraints,
Right,
unfortunately.
but the reason for why I'm saying that is it also matters from a coaching standpoint what these guys put these players to be in the best position for. When you look at
Mhm.
Jonnu Smith, for example, we put Mike McDaniel quite low, but we do have to give respect to how he utilized Jonnu Smith. He
Absolutely.
was in New England, he was in I think Tennessee before this. He wasn't great in both those places.
Right.
You come to Miami and he's shot off. That has to do with the schematics and how you use players. Matt LaFleur's done that better than anybody else. You got to imagine, you lose Aaron Rodgers, who in some people's eyes is a top 10 quarterback of all time.
Yeah.
You lose David Bakhtiari. You lose the I think it was Corey Smith if I'm not wrong, the center, or
Oh,
maybe I'm
Lindsley. Yeah. Yeah.
Lindsley. There we go, Corey Lindsley. You lose offensive lineman anchors. You lose Devontae Smith. People that are not just like any players. They are the players that every scouting defensive team is looking at. And you take this team and you elevate them to such an extent that you expect them to be in the playoffs every year. Like when Detroit went to Green Bay, you're like, Green Bay could give them competition. When the Vikings went to Green Bay, you're like, Green Bay could give them the competition. Every time Green Bay had to go up against a tough opponent, everybody always said this was going to be a good game because they could always give competition.
I agree with that, but here's what I think you're missing. At the end of the day, they still had Rodgers. For that time period, they still had Rodgers. They still had, and I gave, like I said, when it came to my ranking, I still give credit to Matt LaFleur as far as his ability to scheme and develop and implement players into that scheme. Guys like Josh Jacobs, who came in right off the bat, seamless transition. Josh Jacobs was one of the best running backs in the league. Even a guy like Josh Myers, who ended up replacing Corey Lindsley, did a great
Mhm.
job right off the bat. A lot of his
Yeah,
offensive line, he should probably get more credit than any coach in the league as far as keeping a stable offensive line. He is
sure,
really good at his offensive line schemes. He's actually probably the reason why I have Zach Taylor a lot lower as far as what I think of offense over the last few years.
sure.
But also, I still it still holds over my head that 2022 season when his entire team got hurt, okay, and they
hmm
were bad that first part of the season. And it
hmm
took basically that whole roster to come back towards that end of this year where Aaron Rodgers was finally finding his footing before
hmm
they could do anything. So that told me he
Gosh,
leans
see,
more on his players than his players lean on him.
well, what does a coach do? It's a interact. Yeah,
But at this point, that's what I'm saying.
obviously.
We've got to a point in the rankings where I think that that's kind of
No,
separates the
Yash,
good
no.
versus the great
No,
coach.
I completely disagree with that notion. You talk about any coach who loses all of his players. Yes, coach depends just as much on the players as the players depend on the coaches. I give you the schematic, sure, I can write on a paper anything that I want. It's you ultimately who's executing it as a player. I can't do anything about that. So yeah, I am leaning on you, and the players are leaning on him. I think what you're trying to say is he's leaning more on the players, and the players are
Yes,
leaning
that
more on him.
yes.
But I disagree with that because Aaron Rodgers, after Devontae Smith left, let's be honest, acted like a baby who couldn't get his chocolate from his mom when he had a cold. Okay? So
Yes.
he acted like a complete idiot. Now, in that type of scheme, when you're Harold, the king of the organization, the one that we're going to shower flowers with for ages, right? In that situation, you want him to do anything better? I don't think so. But I'll stop with my soliloquy there. Um, I'm taking a lot of time. I apologize. But Matt LaFleur, number 11. Number 10, I'm going to go, in this case, I'm going to go John Harbaugh. Number 10. This is my personal feeling for this. Actually, yeah, this was, for me, very tough between Sean McDermott and John Harbaugh. You can put Sean McDermott at 9. The
Sean
thing for
McDermott at
me is,
9.
yeah,
Cool.
thing for me is, actually, you know what? Scratch that. 10, Sean Payton, and then John Harbaugh, Sean McDermott above him.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I'll get into my reasoning. And this is because we have to stop, acting like we're always going to be this type of person who's going to live in, history forever. I'll start with Sean Payton. I am massively impressed with what he's been able to do with Bo Nix. Massively impressed. All right. But at the same time, you haven't contributed enough for what you are right now. I don't care what you were with the Saints. That's history. This is reality. Right now, I can see 9 coaches that have done better with worse or have done better with the best. That's all I'm saying. When you look at Sean Payton, and I believe this personally, by the end of next season, Sean Payton will be a top 5 head coach for me, without question. Actually, forget me, for anybody, without question. Because the defense is balling. The offense with Bo Nix and all them other guys are slowly building together into, quite honestly, you could see the Drew Brees type vibe coming back in. I see that. But at the same time, I'm not going to put him over people who have shown sustained success now. Now, right? We have to remember Sean Payton struggled with the Super Bowl winning. Quite honestly, you could put the argument for a top 25 quarterback of all time in Russell Wilson. You could put that argument. It's I wouldn't say it's blasphemous by any means to say that. He did go have a horrible season. The team was not structured at all. Had a lot of gaps in it. But this season, they improved massively, massively improved, right? So I do give credit for that. But right now, am I putting him in the top 5 head coaches? No. Because I just see that many coaches that have done better with maybe better rosters, but they've just done so much more. I wouldn't be mad. I mean, I would be mad if you put Sean Payton at 3 or 4. I would be mad at that. But if you put him at like 6 or 7, I'm not gonna get mad. I understand he's had a long history of just success, but in my eyes, for right now, I just don't see him better than the guys that I have here.
I'm laughing
Number,
because you said I would be mad if I put in 3 and 4. And actually, this is kind of funny. I think your reasoning just now, Sean Payton, actually kind of changed where I ranked him because I'll get to this a little bit later, but I had a little bit skepticism on my ranking on Payton for one specific caveat in his resume. Um, but I'm smiling because I originally had him at 3 and 4. We'll see where I put him on the ranking after. But yeah.
that's just ridiculous to me. But number 9, John Harbaugh. Look, I just don't think you put John Harbaugh at 11 for me. I get it. Yes, he's always had Lamar Jackson. You had Derrick Henry, but then you lost in the playoffs again. You haven't done anything useful in the past 8 years or so. Why are you still a head coach? I get all of that. But when they drafted Lamar Jackson, you know what was the sentiment behind that? They're gonna convert Lamar Jackson to a running back. They're gonna make him be a fullback. They're gonna make him do this, do that. They're gonna make him be the H back. John Harbaugh since day one believed in Lamar Jackson. John Harbaugh since day one believed in his head coaches. I mean, not his head coaches, his assistant coaches. You got to understand, Mike. When you think about their defense, every single year, even if their offense is anemic, their defense has always been good. Their defense has always been good. This past season, they were very, very like wishy washy, if you get what I mean. Very high, very low. But during the end of the season, they came out to a pretty, good defense. I would say it was a top 10 defense as it ended the season, right? John Harbaugh has always consistently been able to win. I get it, playoff wise, yes, some decisions that he has made has been horrendous. But if he can constantly win, I don't see why you should be below top 10. Constantly win. Constantly win. I'll say that constantly. Why not? He can always maintain a winning standard. The organization always wins, regardless of when it is, where it is. They always win, and he's been doing that since the day he got there. I just think that's a testament to sustainability of success more than just short-term success. I think John Harbaugh's proven that. So I don't. I think he should be at 9. 8, Sean McDermott. Again, a similar type story, has taken an organization that never knew what winning means and now is constantly taking them to the playoffs. Obviously, yes, he has Josh Allen. I mean, we got to stop talking about it like head coaches who don't have good rosters all of a sudden become top 10 coaches. That's never happened in history, will never happen because it always goes hand in hand. Great coaches, great talent. In this case, Sean McDermott has great talent. I don't know. Give me 10 coaches that are right now top 10 all the time that didn't have a good talent roster. I just don't see it.
I'll give you a
But
few later on in this video.
no, top 10 coaches of all time. You're telling me they don't have a talented enough roster? I don't know. You look at 8, Sean McDermott. Obviously, Josh Allen's improvement has come with Sean McDermott, what he's done in terms of hiring coaches like Brian Daboll, etc. You look at their defense, which this season had gone down, but again, they did make the plays when it mattered most. They were the only team to beat Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season with Patrick Mahomes starting. So that also goes into account, right? When you look at the way, especially this season, it just looked like Kansas City could go undefeated. Thank God that got shut down. But when you look at Sean McDermott, he's just been able to prove himself as a winning coach again and again, regardless of the situation that he's in. Playoff, maybe decisions have been questionable, especially this season against the Rams, I think, where they, instead of like spiking it or running the ball, they tried diving it inside or something like that. I remember that play, but certain things just didn't make sense. And for that reason, I'm not putting him as a top 5 head coach or whatever, but I think he definitely deserves 8. Yash, the question I want to ask you is, should I go from 7 to
I think we
1?
can, for the next 7, we can kind of just trade off spots. Do you want to start or should I?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
7 for me. In this case, Kevin O'Connell.
Oh, wow.
Actually,
Oh,
wait, whoa,
wow.
whoa, whoa. I'm sorry, my bad. I'm just looking at my list right now. Okay, there's some things I disagree with myself. Hold up. Scratch that. I'm sorry. 7,
I
I'm
was
going to go
about
with
to
Jim
say,
Harbaugh. 7, I'm going to go Jim Harbaugh. Oh, my bad. I think I miss. Yeah, Jim Harbaugh is 7 for me. Um, for you talk about doing nothing, doing everything with nothing. That's what he did this season. That was the Chargers' overall roster could have been one of the worst rosters in the NFL. You really look at it, our offensive line was horrible. Our running backs, no one expected anything superb out of our running backs. Let's be honest. Our receivers, we had nobody. We lost everybody. Everybody made the whole joke about you lost Keenan Allen to a 4th round pick. I don't know where he is now. You talk about our defense, Derwin James, and then who else? Joey Bosa, people have forgotten about him. Khalil Mack, big name. I'll give that. Who else? And Joe Ortiz, who will go down in a couple of years' time as the best general manager of all time, comes in and he steers this roster in a direction we've never seen before from a Chargers fan standpoint. And Jim Harbaugh comes in and he does what he does. Takes nothing and makes it everything. I mean, talk about your first season, you go 11-6. Obviously against, the Houston Texans. It was a tough road, but he was able to improve himself every single season, every single game, every single time. He won it his way. I think that's why I have the most respect for him. So for me, seven Jim Harbaugh. I'll fix my rankings here because I think there's some kind of typo. Because Kevin O'Connell at seven make no sense.
So it's seven, and this is another one of those where I say that I prioritize guys who call plays over uh, coaches who don't. Um, I'm gonna go at seven, and I'll the reason why before I say this, the reason why I prioritize, like I said, I'm looking at this more from a who would I hire as my head coach perspective, right? And I'd rather hire a person who calls plays on one side of the ball rather than not on either, is because I feel like they take out one side of the ball. So in the case where they don't have to lean on an offensive play caller in order to determine their success. Or in the case that if both coordinators get fired or what's it called? Get hired by other teams, they don't have to, start from complete scratch. And it doesn't have to be this complete process where they're relying on coordinators every time. And for that reason, I think who I put at number seven is going to be Dan Campbell. Um, Dan Campbell, I want to see him. This one is subject to change. If next year the Lions are remotely as successful as they were this year, he's probably going to be a top five head coach, no doubt, in my opinion, without a doubt. What he did this year, especially towards the second half of the season, was nothing short of impressive. The 15-2 season, obviously, this is a Lions team that's very rarely had success throughout the last 70 years. The last time they really had an inkling of this type of success was when Dwight Eisenhower was the president of the United States. Okay.
Mhm.
For reference, okay, one of LSU's football rivals right now in the SEC is Oklahoma. Okay.
Mhm.
Oklahoma won the last time the Lions were that successful was when Oklahoma had their winning streak of 57 straight games in the 1950s. That was before the GI Bill had got passed, if I'm not mistaken. That is how long the Lions have not had success before Dan Campbell came along long term. So I got to give him credit for that. And what he did with the roster when the roster was injured to hell and back at the end of the year was nothing short of impressive. His decision making is flawless. Even for as aggressive as he goes for it, he knows when to go for it. He seems to just have a magic know-it-all button when it comes to that type of stuff. I don't know really how it works for him, but it does. So I'll give him credit when it comes to that. He is one of the best leaders in the locker room. I know Akhilesh has said it, spoke on this before. I'll speak on this too. Both of us would run through a wall for Dan Campbell. Like he is that good of a motivational speaker and that good of a leader.
Easily, yeah.
Um, the reason why I don't have him higher is simply put right now, I think at times he's leaned a little bit too much on Ben Johnson as far as being a head coach. Being that at times Ben Johnson seems to be making a couple more decisions, both offensively and as a head coach de facto, so to speak. I want to see what he ends up doing this year when it comes to the new offensive and defensive coordinator that he hires. If they're really successful, I'll put Dan Campbell at number five without question. But for now, he's at number seven for that reason. Um, if you don't mind, Akhilesh, I'm going to speak on
Oh,
number
sure.
six now. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Number six, for the same reason, I'm going to go with actually Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin, the reason why I have him at number six is because I've been extremely critical about his hiring as far as the coordinator goes. We've
Mhm.
talked all this time about how Mike Tomlin has unbelievably managed to get the Steelers to as many winning seasons consecutive. He's never had a losing season in his
Yeah.
entire career. That is very impressive, right? And I think he should be given credit for the fact in the last 5 years, especially, he's managed to do this without really a true quarterback situation, which is even more impressive.
Yeah.
So, as far as coaches who do more with less, he's up there with as many. But he does have a really, really good roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that should be given credit. And I think the fact that this team tends to at times lean on their players a lot more than need be in the past years that should definitely be put in question. We look at what the Steelers team is without TJ Watt and how they lose. Um,
Yeah.
his coordinators have been bad for about 10 years now. Ever since Dick LeBeau got fired, I don't think he's had a really good defensive coordinator. He's definitely never had a good offensive coordinator since the 2000s. Um,
Mhm.
it's unbelievable that he has been a coach that long. It seems like he's still in his mid 40s. But Mike Tomlin, for those reasons, is at number 6. He has not had a playoff win since 2016. For that reason, I think it's fair to put him at number 6.
Yeah.
At number so Akhilesh, I'll let you go at number 6.
Sure. For me, so actually for me, it's the exact opposite. I put I put Mike Tomlin at 6 and then Dan Campbell at 5. So again, I'm not gonna actually go on much of a rant. Mike Tomlin, you summarized it for me. He's not had a playoff win since 2016, but what he's been able to do with, quite honestly, a depleted offensive roster has just been incredible. So that's 6. Dan Campbell, like you mentioned, I don't know why he's that low. I think you're just looking at the whole offensive genius standpoint, but that's your opinion, so I'm not gonna get at that. Um, for me, Dan Campbell is the best head coach, right, that you want to find in terms of a motivational speaker, a guy who can take guys who think that they can't do anything and just elevate them to a level. So, I mean, for me, when you look at Dan Campbell, like you mentioned, the last time the lines were ever relevant was when black and white TV was norm, right? So you just think about what they've been able to do. I mean, Detroit Pizza was more famous than the Lions, for God's sakes. So although, by the way, I've really wanted to try that for a long time. I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat anything with meat, anything associated with meat. Only meat thing that I'll try is that it's made by humans at the end of the day. So for me, I mean, Detroit pizza, man, it looks amazing. But when you look at the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell has taken, his type of players, infused his way and his, like, we often talk about a structure and identity. That's what the coaches try to, impart into their players, and the players mold that type of identity into the way they play. He's done that better than any coach, I would say, in the league right now. Um, Now, the reason why I'm putting him at 5 and not at like number 3 or 2, which now scares me because I see 5 to 1, and I don't see one name that's already been mentioned on Yash's list. So I think what I said before might come now, where he puts Sean Payton at 3, which is going to be ridiculous to me. But you look at the reason why I haven't put him at those 3 spots is, what's he gonna be without Ben Johnson? Is he gonna go 9? Is he gonna go? To me, in my eyes, if he goes like 11-6 or 10-7 without Ben Johnson, he's 5 easy. Because the reason why I say that is, sure, he has an amazing roster, and but Ben Johnson, if we're really talking about it, may be the hottest offensive coordinator candidate that's ever been in the NFL. We could make
I
that
go
argument
further. I'd say he's probably the best. I'd say he's the most sought after first time coaching candidate we have had
ever.
ever,
I think
at
so. I
least in
don't
my
think it's the,
lifetime.
yeah, I'll say that exactly. It's just insane what he's been able to do, right, with that roster. I mean, it's extremely talented, but that talent only shows up because of the way they play, right? I
Agreed.
mean, you do look at Jared Goff, you look at those guys, but the thing is, Dan Campbell believed in them. That's why Ben Johnson got to use them. See that distinction?
Agreed.
So that's why I put Dan Campbell at 5. I'm not putting him any higher because I just want to see what he can do without the best offensive
Right.
coordinator in NFL history, maybe.
Right. At number 5, I'm gonna go with Sean Payton. This is where I'm gonna put Sean Payton. And
Okay.
this comes from the
You know
fact
what?
that, hey,
Fine.
like I
Okay.
said, I'm not gonna put him in my top 4. And I'll get to that. The one reason why I was questioning putting why I had Sean Payton in, I was relying on Sean Payton's past resume, maybe a little too much, because putting him, I had him originally at number 3. Um,
Thank you.
and granted, I do think his resume is on par with anybody's in the league ever, right? Especially where we saw those, I think the last 3 seasons he was there, where Drew Brees got injured the last 2, he was able to take with Taysom Hill, this Saints team, they were, I think, 6-1 in 2019, or was it 2020? I forget which year. One of
No.
those years with Drew Brees got hurt for an extended period, and they were undefeated, close to undefeated. And then the next year, they only lost one game without him. And then they got Jameis Winston. And I think people forget this. The Saints were 4-1 with Jameis Winston at the beginning of 2021 before Jameis Winston tore his ACL. They still finished the season 8-8 with no quarterback by the end of the year. They were in a worse situation than my Niners. I'll take that back. They were as very close situation to what the Niners were in the NFC Championship a few years ago against the Eagles. So
Hmm.
he should be given credit for that. He is great at also identifying when something doesn't work and moving ship. Now, I think there are a few instances where that isn't the case, and that's what had a little bit of question, both in his past resume and now. I think the two pieces of time that had me questioning whether he should be as high as I put him were 2014 to 2016 and then 2023. Obviously, he had one of the worst defenses in the league. And at that time, he was questioned for his decision making. Now, I do think he improved as a head coach and kind of got over that stretch. But I think also his inability to be able to help Russell Wilson get back to his former self compared to a guy like Mike Tomlin, I think that should be put out there. But I do think he's also at the same time able to get the most out of a lot of quarterbacks in bad situations. And I think he's able to get the best out of a lot of rookie quarterbacks. The development he's done with Bo Nix is nothing short of phenomenal. And I think what he's done with the very young offense in general, with guys like Troy Franklin and Audric Estime and Javonte Williams, is really good. He's made the guys on the offensive line of this Broncos one of the best in the league. A guy like Quinn Miners, who went to our high school football coach's alma mater, Wisconsin Whitewater, shout out
Yeah.
Wisconsin Whitewater, became one of the best guards in the league under Sean Payton's watch. And I think those
That's
are the
fair.
things that make Sean Payton such a good offensive head coach. But I would also give credit for him on staying peace with a guy in Vance Joseph who's been criticized so many times, including by myself, especially after the 70 piece that was put on them last year. And this year they became one of the best defenses with a
Hmm.
defense that doesn't really per se look great on paper, but Nick Benito became a defensive player of the year finalist. Pat
Yeah.
Surtain was the defensive player of the year. They let go of Justin Simmons, and guys who replaced them were great. Brandon Jones. You look at the linebackers, Alex Singleton, Drew Sanders. On the defensive line, Zach Allen is one of the most underrated players in the league. DJ Jones, one of the most underrated defensive line in the league. All of that should be credited by how great of a staff Sean Payton's put together. And for that reason, I still think he should be number 5. And we'll see what he does going forward. But I think his past resume also helps him a little bit in this case, where he ends up being number 5 on this list rather than number 8, number 9, number 10, like Jim Harbaugh, Sean McDermott, etc. He's done more with less, in my opinion. That's why I think he ends up being number 5.
I think Jim Harbaugh did more with less compared to Sean Payton, but that's a different argument for another day. But four for me, Nick Sirianni. You
Yeah,
look
I
at
have Nick Sirianni too at number 4. So I think we can just kind of, yeah, I'll
look.
let
I
you.
mean, the thing is, you, we talk about last season. I think I would have put Nick Sirianni like 15, 14 because of the way that whole stretch ended. Last season. This season, I mean, you started off in a way that your own fans start hating you. But you take Saquon Barkley, you take all these guys together, and he's proven it twice where he knows what works and he's trying to figure out that. He brings in good offensive coordinators, he brings in good defensive coordinators, and he allows Howie Roseman to be Howie Roseman, and he takes all that together and he finishes it off with a championship against Patrick Mahomes, which at this point in time maybe not the same level, but prior to the Super Bowl was like saying you beat Tom Brady if you beat Patrick Mahomes. It really was at that point. And I want to bring this up again, but you know what? Actually, I'll bring it up. 3 years ago, this guy here and another dude, who I don't care about anymore, started going on this whole rant about Patrick Mahomes is going to be greater than Tom Brady at some point in time. You're just not ready to believe it because you were a Patriots fan. You're just not ready to
Hold on.
believe.
I didn't say the last part. He did.
Hold up,
I did.
hold up. But it was a together effort of essentially saying Patrick Mahomes is going to surpass Tom Brady. That was the truth. Don't lie
Yeah,
now.
that's true.
That was
That
the
is
truth.
true.
That was the truth. And now all of a sudden they lose this one Super Bowl and everybody's like, "Oh no, I never said that. I never meant to say that. I mean, Tom Brady was always the GOAT. We never meant to say that."
I still have not moved away from that previous statement. I still think it's possible,
I don't
but
think it's possible. I think it's gone. Because the thing right now is you're 3-2 in Super Bowls. That's the truth. You're 3-2 in Super Bowls, and this is the difference between Brady and him. The three Super Bowls Brady lost, he lost by either a touchdown or a field goal. The two Super Bowls Mahomes has lost, one by the way to Tom Brady, got absolutely smoked. The second Super Bowl got absolutely smoked. That's the difference between both. In my eyes, honestly, Joe Montana might surpass both of these dudes, but we'll get that to another day. Because I mean, Montana went 4-0. So I mean, if we're putting Jordan as the greatest, we could put Montana for the greatest as that reason. But three, I'll finish off three, Yashi. You can take three and two. I think
if you
number
don't mind,
one.
before you move on, I would
Go
just
ahead.
want to add a couple things about Sirianni that I think you did mention. As far as postseason, we're talking about Mahomes, right? Sirianni has had a better postseason, has had better postseason success than pretty much any head coach that we criticize all the time. As far as his ability to stand up against a team as formidable as the Chiefs every year in the Super Bowl. Even the loss that they had against the Chiefs, they lost 38 to 35 on a really, really controversial call, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jalen Hurts playing the game of his life. Okay. I think the fact that this is a team that has had a great roster throughout Howie Roseman's tenure, right? But the year before Sirianni got there was, if I'm not mistaken, 4-12, right?
Yeah.
They were a drama. They were an absolute cesspool of drama to the point where I remember the Athletic. I was getting physical treatment for my hamstring injuries that spring. Every day I'd go for PT during the track season, and I'd have my phone out, and every day I get a new article from the Athletic about the Philadelphia Eagles. They were
Yeah.
just incredibly, they were just incredibly hard to watch, hard to hear about during that time period. So Sirianni definitely deserves flowers for that. Being able to move on from Sean Desai and Brian Johnson after a year and know that that's not working, and get Vic Fangio and get
Yeah.
Kellen Moore, and how that worked. And I think on top of that, his development of young players. What really impresses me with the young players, I think they've drafted guys who everyone knows are going to be good. But the fact that they've exceeded expectations right
Mm.
off the bat that quickly, that I think Sirianni should be given flowers for more than anything. And the fact that his worst record, and the fact that people are criticizing him for an 11-6 season, I mean, if that's his baseline, that really should tell you how good of a head coach he is.
Yeah.
Even for the fact that he doesn't call plays, I have no question anymore about his hiring ability.
Yeah.
So that's
Also,
why for me he's still at number 4.
number three for me is the name I mentioned at seven on accident. Number three for me is Kevin Connell.
Okay.
This guy, I mean, he took the world by storm this past season because I think over any season, this season solidified him as a top five head coach for 3 years. The reason why I say that is Sam Darnold. The way you even say that sounds like you're a cowboy, like Sam Darnold. Like it just, I don't know what's up with the name. I like the name, but like Sam Darnold, like it sounds like whenever what was that thing Stephen A. Smith once on the show was like Sam Howell. Like he sounds
Yeah.
like Sam
Oh
Howell, but like
yeah, he did
Sam
the same thing
Darnold.
with one of the Cowboys quarterbacks, Ben DiNucci.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's got a ring to it, but if we're being honest, Sam Darnold was looked at as a draft bust. We remember when he got drafted to the godforsaken organization, the New York Jets, was horrible there. And then he comes to the 49ers, he goes to the Panthers, he played a couple of games with the Panthers, again, wasn't anything noticeable. I think he went to the Niners after the Panthers or something like that. And then he comes here, and we're looking at Kevin O'Connell just drafted his next quarterback. You talk about a guy who won a college championship with Jim Harbaugh. He comes in, we're expecting him to win a championship, then he gets injured. And you're thinking, like, oh my God, we just screwed our entire thing up. We're done for. Sam Darnold comes in and, I mean, launches the entire NFL on a whole spree. This guy goes, like, I mean, I think they had a 7 game winning streak or something like that, where they just consistently kept on winning. They were looking to beat the Detroit Lions as the top runner in the NFC, which to me is just mind-boggling, right? You talk about that division, how strong it is, and this team's about to beat the Detroit Lions. That was crazy to me.
Not just
With
beat them.
Sam
I mean, they were
Darnold,
14-3 with that roster.
exactly. With Sam Darnold as your quarterback, now obviously playoff success, Kevin O'Connell has had nothing. We have to put that into play. But the fact that you can take a quarterback, real honesty, who could have been a third string quarterback, make him play like an MVP. You take Justin Jefferson, you take that offensive line who's got even better now, and then you trust everything in people like Brian Flores, people like on your coaching staff to have complete control of what they need to do to make this team the best it can be with the offensive genius that you are. I think Kevin O'Connell's just proven to me that he's a top five head coach for 3 years now. He could have two losing seasons and still be a top five head coach for me. Because this season, what he's been able to do, no coach has ever been able to do what he did this season. So that's why Kevin O'Connell, for me, I think top five head coach.
So at number 3, I'm gonna go with Sean McVay personally. Um, I have Sean McVay at number 3 because I think that his the standard that is put on the Rams at times is a little bit high for what Sean McVay's performance can be at times, especially in the last few years. So this is more of a recency thing than it is past thing. If we're talking about his resume overall, yeah, he's probably number 2. But I think that his overall skill set, I think he has gotten a lot of players. Let's put it off. Let's start off with this. Les Snead is a really good GM to get as many young players as they have and be able to draft as well as they have, and have that type of expectations, and to then make the playoffs like they did in 2023, absolutely impressive. What we saw him do in 2020, I think, was probably one of the best coaching jobs I've seen in recent memory. Where this was a team that tore down most of their roster and then ended up getting even better somehow, right? This is a guy who's done well with Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford. He took Jared Goff's career from the dead, basically from 2016, and made him into a franchise quarterback. Traded him, got Matthew Stafford, and then won a Super Bowl, right? Cooper Kupp, under his watch, had the best receiving season in NFL history, right? My arguments, though, are schematically, to be a little bit critical. This is probably the least of my concerns. Schematically, I think he could be a little bit better as far as the run game overall. Offensive line, I think he prioritizes passing a little bit too much, and I think that hurts him at times, especially against more superior opponents. On top of that, I think the fact that over the last couple of seasons they have been 10-7. I've had higher expectations for the Rams with the roster that they've had, especially this past season. And I thought that their struggles at times in the middle of the year were very much self-inflicted. And for that reason, I think that over this past few years, Sean McVay could have been better at certain issues. 2022 still really kind of is just a blemish on his resume. Forget the fact that Matthew Stafford was injured at the end of the season. At the beginning of the year, the Rams were not good whatsoever. And that to me just seems very out of the blue for a coach as good as Sean McVay. And for that reason, I just cannot put him number 2. At number 2, however, I will go Kevin O'Connell. I've been as impressed as anybody with Kevin O'Connell. And I'll give some context behind this. Akilesh, you'll probably remember when Kevin O'Connell first got hired. I don't think I knew less about a head coach hire as much as Kevin O'Connell in my time watching football. I was so I wasn't confused with the hire. I just didn't know what to make of it. Right. And I kept asking you, what is your opinion on Kevin O'Connell? What is your opinion on Kevin O'Connell? I remember a few times I kept asking you over and over to the point it probably annoyed Akhilesh, although he never said that. Um, but he kept saying, "Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I really don't know." And I kept asking him this question as the season went on. And I think both of our opinions were very much similar throughout the year, where we were
It
just
was.
really, really impressed. And I'll say this, from day one, he set that standard.
Yeah.
I listened to his press conference, um, his introductory press conference, and I was quite frankly moved. Like I
Mm.
genuinely thought like if I was in that locker room and I was one of those players and I heard that, I was like, okay, we got a leader. We got a guy who, you know, knows
We can
his
believe it.
vision better than anybody in the league and executes it better than anybody in the league. And boy, oh
Yeah.
boy, has he done that. Everybody knows I've been one of Kirk Cousins' biggest haters, critics, whatever you want to call it. I've been extremely critical about Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins had two of his best seasons with Kevin O'Connell at times where he wasn't a good quarterback.
Hmm.
Kevin O'Connell had him looking like an MVP in 2023 before he
He
got.
did. He did.
I think people also forget the fact that after that, I think the Vikings had a winning season with or a winning record without Kirk Cousins that year. They were 4-3, if I'm not mistaken, with
They
Jaron
were.
Hall and Josh Dobbs as their quarterbacks, and then Nick Mullins at the end of the year. They were fighting against the Lions, for God's sakes, in both
Yeah.
games that they played with really inferior talent. And then we talk about this year. This year, to me, solidified him in every way as a top two quarterback, coach.
Yeah. I see.
Sam Darnold, Akhilesh talked about that, so I won't go too much in detail about that. I think everything else, though, however, should be talked about. Justin Jefferson went from easily one of the best receivers in the league to the number one in the league, right?
Hmm.
In every way. Kevin O'Connell's maximized his skill set in every way. There's an ESPN video um, that talks about Justin Jefferson and how good he is on every single route. That should be given to Kevin O'Connell, being able to maximize his route tree to the utmost, right? And we saw it on display against teams like the San Francisco 49ers this past year, against the Lions last year. We've seen it several times, right? So that's there. I think the offensive line improvement should be noted. Guys like Dalton Reisner, guys like Garrett Bradbury, guys like Brian O'Neill have had career years under him. Christian Darrisaw has blossomed into one of the best tackles in the league. But I would even go further and say after the first year where they had, I forget the name. If you remember, Akhilesh, can you tell me the name of oh yeah, Ed Donatel, the defensive coordinator in the first year. They had one of the worst defenses in NFL history the first year.
Yeah.
Move ship and then go and get Brian Flores, who didn't have per se the greatest defensive talent in the world, and
Hmm.
get that team to um, then all of a sudden have one of the best defense in the leagues, as versatile as they were, and make so many unknown commodities into superstar names. That is something unheard of. And his ability to not just hire a head coach or hire a defensive coordinator as good as Brian Flores, but to hire a guy who's as stable as him. And on top of that, hire as many other good head coaches as he has. His scheme, his overall ability to move ship, his ability to make something out of nothing. You were asking for coaches who I think could make more with less. Kevin O'Connell is exhibit A on that.
Not over Jim Harbaugh. Not over Jim Harbaugh.
Absolutely.
No, no way.
Absolutely.
No way.
I don't think anybody thought this roster was going to be 14-3 or even have a winning season at that.
I would definitely say that we're gonna have a winning season. 14-3, obviously not. Obviously not 14-3. Okay, but winning season, yeah. That
Wait,
team,
at the beginning of the year, you thought that this team would have a winning season.
I thought they would go 10-7 or 11-6.
I can pull up the receipts if you want on that.
Okay, I don't mind. I don't mind actually. I don't mind.
Well, unfortunately, I can't read in the video, but I will.
Yeah,
I
I don't
can.
mind
Someone can
actually.
go find it out. But
If I
absolutely,
if I if I've been proven wrong, I will come on the next episode and say I was wrong. I'll come on the next episode and say I was wrong.
definitely.
I'll be honest.
But
Now,
yes, Kevin O'Connell for me for that reason is number two.
okay, 2-1. I mean, I think one is pretty obvious for
Yeah,
everybody
we'll
here.
both say it at that
But
point. But yeah,
Andy Reid, right?
Andy
Number
Reid.
one. Number two, the reason now Yash may have convinced me slightly, but I'm still gonna keep Sean McVay at number two. I just think what he's done offensively has revolutionized the game to an extent no one has been able to within any of the coaches here. I think Sean McVay has elevated everybody's game that's been here. We have to also understand you lose Aaron Donald, and then you sack one of the best offensive lines with the Vikings 9 times in the playoffs. We also have to give consideration to this. Kevin O'Connell's never won a playoff game. So if we're going to keep John Harbaugh, we're going to keep,
Yeah, that
Sean,
was one thing I was definitely on the,
no,
on the fence
people
about.
people who haven't won anything important, which is a
That's fair.
playoff game, right? And most people, if we're going to keep that same standard, he hasn't won anything that's important. So that's the way I'm looking at it. But I think Sean McVay, as you said, is kind of living in his past, if you will. He's only had one losing season, but he also hasn't had any exemplary seasons by any measures. But since they offensively can every year just execute, and especially this season without Aaron Donald, with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and all those young talent, just be able to attack the quarterback relentlessly the way they did, I think it just goes to a testament of how he's able to hire talent. We have to remember. Well, actually, let's look at the list. Matt LaFleur, Kevin
Kevin
O'Connell,
O'Connell.
Zach Taylor, all these guys who are at least in my like top 20 coaches are all Sean McVay disciples. Which just goes to show as a head coach he can get a lot of great talent out there.
And that's not
So
to mention guys that you've liked in the past, guys like Brandon Staley.
yeah, who we can make jokes, but in his first 2 seasons, he took a team that wasn't expected to win and brought them close enough.
Right.
Okay, I will say that. Yeah. Now, number one, Andy Reid goes without saying. The man's done it for time immemorial. His waistband has only got larger. His mustache has only got larger. I mean, I don't know how many amount of cheeseburgers he's been eating, but continue to eat them, my man, because you coaching the NFL is like the greatest chemistry lecture anybody could have. I mean, he is just every single season being able to put out products like the way he's been able to do 3 times in a row to make it to the Super Bowl. Like that's incredible to me. How if you do that, you're a top five head coach of all time, and Andy Reid's a top five head coach of all time. I said
Absolutely.
it now. It's incredible what he's been able to do. I hope he can do it for longer. I kind of don't want to also see him do it for longer because I hate the fact that the Chiefs always have to be in the Super Bowl.
Right.
But it's just amazing what he's been able to do. Now, for me, what would be interesting is it won't change my ranking, but what would be interesting is to see what he's gonna do to get past Travis Kelce. Because Kelce, for me, he's done.
Mm.
Travis Kelce is done.
Yeah.
He's had a great career. Stop. Retire within the next 1 or 2 years. Do the whole Taylor Swift thing. Just leave it off. I'm done with him.
Like Beyonce
Uh,
said, put a ring on it.
yeah, exactly. Right. Just move on with life. But I think Andy Reid he's a good coach. I mean, not a good coach. He's the greatest coach right now.
Right.
But I'm interested to see how he elevates the team to move past history.
Andy Reid is in a tier of his own. Yeah, like you said, there's not much we can, there's nothing we can criticize him. It's really just now at this point, just like, what else can he do as a head coach, right?
Yeah.
He's had a winning season all of it. If we're just talking about his Chiefs tenure, right?
Mhm.
He's had a winning season for every season for 12 years now. I've been watching football for 14 seasons.
Yeah.
Andy Reid, from the time I really started watching football around 2013, really got hooked onto it, has been the standard of head coaches. Him and Bill Belichick, but Bill Belichick's no longer a head coach in the NFL.
Yeah.
But Andy Reid is that guy. And I think it should be noted. I think people, when they're hating on the Chiefs, they're like, how do they do this? How are they winning? How are they getting this
Yeah.
lucky? How are they doing? I don't think enough people talk about Andy Reid anymore. I really don't. The fact that this team was 15 and what was it 15-2 this past year, that's Andy Reid. That the fact that they were able to win as many close games as they were, that's Andy Reid. The
Yeah.
fact of the matter that they are as good of decision making at the end of the game, that's Andy Reid. The fact that they are as good in the postseason as they are, that's Andy Reid. Everything you want to question every reason why the Chiefs are such a terrifying
Andy
and such
Reid.
an annoying team to watch because they always win no matter what. Andy Reid is the answer to that. Now, don't hate
Yeah,
on him because he's probably the most likable guy on the Chiefs right now.
that's true.
But Andy Reid is that guy. He's just been that guy since what, 1999?
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
mean, he's been doing this for almost 3 decades. It's
It's insane.
unbelievable. And he is a Hall of Fame head coach, and he's one of the best. And it has been an absolute thrill for 15 years to get to watch him. And I would love to watch him coach
15
for
more.
another 20 years. Um, just maybe tone back a little on how much you dominate the NFL with
Exactly.
Andy Reid.
Yeah. Lose a little playoff games here and there if you want.
Give some lesser teams some chance. My Niners.
Exactly.
But yeah, that does it for the coaching section. Again, this is our list. Akhilesh got Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, Nick Sirianni, Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin, and I think you guys can read through the rest of the list for him. For me at the top, I got Andy Reid, Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay, Nick Sirianni, Sean Payton, Mike Tomlin, and then you can read the rest of the list. We'll put it in the comments section for you guys if you guys like. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know what your opinions are. And I think for that matter, I think that should be the end of the video.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much for watching.
Hmm.
Please remember to like and subscribe. We're getting very close to the NFL draft, which is some exciting stuff. Some videos are being posted more now on a daily basis as far as draft reviews from both me and Akhilesh, as far as overall what we think about the certain players. And I know, Akhilesh, you're definitely excited about our next video. We got some interesting things coming up later on. But for now, that wraps it up. Um, Thank you guys again so much for watching,
Hmm.
and we'll see you next time. Peace.